Chapter 365. When Xiaoqing saw Dai curled into a ball and shivered in the corner because of his body, her heart ached terribly. Perhaps Xiaoqing had treated Dai like a child at the very beginning. If she hadn't just become a mother at that time, and if it hadn't been for the fact that Dai was different from ordinary zombies, perhaps she would have killed Dai when they first met. However, after getting along with each other for a long time, their relationship had changed. They had gone through life and death together again and again, and the special situation that happened that time had made their relationship impure. If Dai was an ordinary person who could be responsible for his own decisions, Xiaoqing might have chosen to be with him. However, she couldn't do that now. He had no memory and was just like a child. Everything was taught by Xiaoqing. If Xiaoqing was with him now, what would happen when Dai regained his memory? Would he regret it? Would he think that she was taking advantage of him? It could be said that the relationship between her and Dai was really messy. As for Yan Qiue, sometimes Xiaoqing despised herself. When Yan Qiue confessed to her, she rejected his feelings on one hand, but didn't reject his approach on the other hand. It was like a whore who wanted to maintain her chastity. The men around her were all very nice to her, so she couldn't make a choice and could only pretend that she didn't know. However, this couldn't work. Sooner or later, she would have to make a choice. She would choose one of the men and give up the others, or she would choose none and leave with the child. After thinking for a long time, Xiaoqing looked at Dai in the corner and said softly to Yan Qiue, "It's cold at night. I forgot to bring a quilt when I went out." Yan Qiue stared at Xiaoqing for a while and then chuckled, "I'll go outside and find some clean beds." Yan Qiue definitely knew what she was going to do. Xiaoqing felt bitter in her mouth. She asked Dai to play with the little bun at the door and then walked to Dai. Dai lowered his head silently. There were blue veins on his neck because of his endurance. He didn't know where the unbearable pain came from and how to relieve it. However, he didn't want Xiaoqing to feel embarrassed, so he would rather continue to endure it. Xiaoqing touched his neck and whispered, "Raise your head and look at me." Dai raised his head obediently. There was still some grievance in his eyes and he looked pitiful. Xiaoqing lowered her head and kissed Dai's eyes gently. Then she said, "Close your eyes. Don't look at me." She felt disgusted when she was looked at by such pure eyes. However, Dai was stubborn and refused to close his eyes. He looked at Xiaoqing in a daze, and the grievance in his eyes became more and more intense. Xiaoqing sighed softly. In the end, she reached out and held the source of evil. She said helplessly, "If only you could remember everything. Then she wouldn't have to feel guilty and bear such a burden. She could make her own decision clearly and decisively." Yan Qiue seriously went out and found several new quilts. Then she hugged the soft quilt and sat at the door for a long time. Occasionally, there would be one or two low gasps and Dai's suppressed roars from inside. Every time this happened, his fingers would grip the corner of the quilt so tightly that his knuckles would turn white. How could he not be jealous? He was so jealous that he went crazy. How could he not be sad? He was so sad that he wanted to die. How could he not be resentful? He hated her so much that his heart, liver, spleen, and lungs were all in a mess. The woman he cherished, the woman he was willing to treat as his queen, was doing the most intimate thing with another man at this moment. However, he couldn't do anything but swallow the sweetness in his throat. Chapter 366. If someone were to pay attention to Yan Qiue at this moment, they would discover that his eyes were completely red and his expression was twisted into a hideous expression due to the extreme repression. The jealousy, pain, and torment that welled up in his heart nearly drove Yan Qiue crazy. He raised his hand and fiercely bit his wrist, tearing open his flesh and letting his blood drip out. This kind of physical pain should have brought him the most joy, but at this moment, it couldn't alleviate even the slightest bit of his pain. Yan Qiue curled into a ball and continuously bit the skin on his arm. In the end, he knelt on the floor and hugged the blanket. He buried his face in the blanket and tightly covered it until the feeling of suffocation caused his mind to go blank. Only then did he slowly let go of his hand and lay on the floor, losing all his strength. After a long, long time, there was no sound in the room. Yan Qiue fiercely rubbed his face and tried his best to make his expression look more normal. Then he pulled his sleeves and covered his scarred arm before walking in with the blanket. There was still an ambiguous atmosphere in the room. Xiao Qing was already dressed neatly and expressionlessly walked into the room with Air Dai in her arms. Yan Qiue followed and then took a step before Xiao Qing. He changed the old blanket on the bed, cleaned the dust, and put on the new one. Then Xiao Qing put Air Dai under the blanket. Air Dai had already fallen into a deep sleep. Xiao Qing pulled the blanket over him and for a moment, she didn't know what to say. The atmosphere was extremely awkward. Yan Qiue lowered her delicate eyes. After a while, she tried to find a topic to talk about. When we reach the capital, I must tell old Master Qin to find a spacious house for me. I want to buy a large bed, the kind that can allow several people to roll around on it. It's comfortable to sleep. Qiue, do you like freedom? Xiao Qing didn't want to disturb Air Dai, so she walked to the balcony. She had never smoked in the past since smoking was bad for her health. But now, whenever she was frustrated, she would smoke a cigarette. Yan Qiue's face immediately paled. He leaned against the balcony door and said in a low voice, "Why are you suddenly asking me this?" Xiao Qing holds the railing and looks at the dilapidated house not far away. Her heart is empty and a little sore. It's too tiring and hard to follow me. You have to run around almost every day. I can't give you anything. It's better for you to live in the Linchuan base. Someone will provide for you. You just need to do the experiments you like and do whatever you want. What are you trying to say? Yan Qiue's fingertips were trembling. He stared at Xiao Qing, his eyes red with anger and pain. Xiao Qing was shocked. Then, she smiled bitterly. I'm not trying to drive you away. I just think you deserve better. Yan Qiue grabbed Xiao Qing's hand and said coldly, "You always think that you're strong and that you're always willing to make decisions for others. But have you ever thought about my feelings? I'm cheap. I just like to follow you. Even if you don't like me, I'll stick to you shamelessly. Even if you hate me, I'll secretly watch you." Yan Qiue's whole body clung to Xiao Qing like a snake clinging to a tree. He kept moving closer to Xiao Qing. Finally, he gently stuck out the tip of his tongue and licked Xiao Qing's neck. Xiao Qing reflexively wanted to break away, but she smelled blood. She lowered her head and grabbed Yan Qiue's arm. When she pulled it up, his sleeve loosened, revealing his scarred arm. Xiao Qing subconsciously tightened her grip on Yan Qiue's wrist. She couldn't help but be angry. She kept making all kinds of food and thought of all kinds of ways to nourish his body. In the end, he ruined himself. Chapter 367. The word master sounded like a Japanese manga. It was filthy and full of filth. Promise me this once. Yan Qiue looked at Xiao Qing pitifully. Xiao Qing felt her scalp tingle. She had to say, "I'll do as you say." For some reason, she suddenly imagined Yan Qiue wearing a maid's uniform with nothing inside. When she came home, Yan Qiue came over with a pair of slippers. He changed her shoes and asked her with a flirtatious look, "Welcome home, master. Do you want to eat first or eat me first?" That's so scary. Can I choose to eat Air Dai first? After much difficulty, Xiao Qing finally finished applying the ointment on a certain one. Xiao Qing glanced at him and saw that his upper body had been torn to shreds by Xiao Qing. His pants were also unrecognizable, and one of his shoes was still hanging outside the window. From the front, it looked normal. From the back, it was full of red whip marks. It was very ambiguous. Shao Qing had no choice but to carry Yan Qiue and walk into the room. In the end, she stuffed him into the quilt. Yan Qiue only had his head exposed. He lay in the quilt happily and whispered, "It's already so late. Come in and sleep. If you don't eat, Xiao Tong still has to eat." Shao Qing rolled her eyes. She reached into the quilt like a rogue and slapped Yan Qiue's butt. Then she said, "Sleep well. I'll go and cook." After she went out to cook, Yan Qiue turned over with a melancholy face and stared at Dai. In fact, as long as Shao Qing was willing, he was willing to share Shao Qing with Dai. Just like before, the three of them lived a good life together. But needless to say, Shao Qing was the kind of person who would instantly turn into an old cadre when faced with such a situation. She would never agree to such a ridiculous thing. In fact, if it was possible to monopolize Shao Qing, who would be willing to share her with other men? Even he was unwilling to do that. He just didn't want to lose Shao Qing because he knew very well that in Shao Qing's heart, Dai would always be more important than him. If one day, Shao Qing was willing to accept both of them at the same time, he would be the one taking advantage. Because the first person to meet Shao Qing and enter Shao Qing's heart was Dai, and he was just a latecomer. On the other side, Shao Qing finished cooking and fed Xiao Tong and Little Bun. She asked Xiao Tong to take Little Bun to sleep and then went back to the house. The two men were lying on the bed, sleeping soundly. They consciously left the middle space, just enough for one person to lie down. It felt as if the first wife and the second wife were waiting for her to go home and sleep. Shao Qing struggled for a minute, then got into the bed and prepared to sleep. The two men who were sleeping soundly immediately came up to her, one on her left and one on her right. Shao Qing's mouth twitched, but she couldn't be bothered and fell asleep. The next day, Dai was the first to wake up. He turned sideways and peeked at Shao Qing. His eyes were filled with joy, satisfaction, and a little shyness. Shao Qing cared about him after all. She didn't want him to suffer, and she didn't want him to suffer. Thinking of this, he was satisfied. The next to wake up was Yan Qiue, but Shao Qing was the last to wake up. She had done 2 physical activities in a row last night, and she had thought so much. She was dead tired. As soon as Shao Qing woke up, the two men gave her a good morning kiss from each side and salivated all over her face. Then, she kicked each of them off the bed. Then Shao Qing got up and went to cook. Yesterday's incident was too sudden, so they didn't have enough work to do. Today, they had to continue to work and get more crystal cores to make up for the contribution points. So after breakfast, the group started to get busy. Dai and Yan Qiue, who were satisfied, were very active today, especially Dai. He was like the wind, rushing here and there. Every time he came back, he would hold a pile of crystal cores and give them to Shao Qing as if they were treasures. His behavior was just like a boyfriend in love giving gifts to his girlfriend. And he was much crazier than those boyfriends. Every time he came back, he was hurt all over, but he didn't get tired. In the end, he was slapped to the ground by Shao Qing and calmed down. Okay, now that we're full, it's time to work. The whole S-City was not small. Even if all the paranormals in the capital were called to clean it up, it would take more than a month to finish the preliminary cleaning. After the preliminary cleaning, there would be a second cleaning, and even a third cleaning. They had to check round by round until they were sure that there was not a single zombie in the whole city. Only then could the survivors in the base move in. So the S-City survivor base almost mobilized all the paranormals in the base to clean up S-City. The expected goal was to move into S-City within half a year. Shao Qing led her friends. No matter where they went, they would meet the cleaning teams of the S-City survivor base. Generally speaking, she would avoid them. If they met a large number of zombies, she would take her friends and cut them up. Therefore, their fame soon spread to all the paranormal squads in S City. Almost everyone knew that there was such a squad, known as the Zombie Meat Grinder, crazily cleaning up zombies everywhere. The north of the city has been cleaned up by them. Let's go to the south. Xiao Qing pointed at the crystal cores and said helplessly. Okay, let's inform them. We'll go there first. Yan Hanqing nodded seriously, then gave the signal to Yan Qiue and the others. After a simple communication, Xiao Qing led Air Dai and the others to the south of the city. They didn't know whether they were lucky or unlucky, but soon after they arrived at the south of the city, they encountered a large number of zombies. Chapter 368. Those zombies were provoked, so they rushed over from all directions, trying to surround the small group of paranormals in the middle, which seemed to have no sense of existence in the zombie crowd. Xiao Qing saw the group of zombies from a distance. She calculated and found that as long as they cleaned up this wave of zombies, they would have enough contribution points. Without another word, Xiao Qing released a signal flare and prepared to call the rest of her friends over. After all, the more the merrier. However, seeing that the small group of paranormals was about to be drowned in the sea of zombies, Xiao Qing couldn't just stand aside and wait for Yan Hanqing and the others to come over. Therefore, Xiao Qing was the first to take action. She found a balcony on the second floor, then climbed up. After occupying the high ground, she waved her hands, and the vines rushed out quickly with her mind. The vines wrapped around the waists of the paranormals who were drowned in the sea of zombies, then dragged them back. Those paranormals were full of despair and were ready to die, but they closed their eyes and didn't feel the pain of being torn apart. Instead, they felt as if they were riding on clouds. When they opened their eyes again, they saw a woman carrying a child in front of them. The woman was expressionless. She took back the vines, then jumped off the balcony before they could react. Only then did they come to their senses. Were they saved? After saving the small group of paranormals, Xiao Qing joined her friends. Air Dai jumped into the zombie crowd without hesitation and kept killing the high-level zombies. Xiao Qing didn't rush in. She needed to protect Little Bun and Xiao Tong. Xiao Tong released a spiritual shield and followed behind Xiao Qing. The shield covered Xiao Qing and Yan Qiue, so no zombie could break through it. Then two people, one in front of the vines and the other one controlling the air, harvesting the zombies at a fast speed. Soon, Yan Hanqing and the others, who had received the news, arrived. They came from another direction and surrounded the zombies, then began to clean them up. Their combination was like this. Gu Chuan was in charge of freezing the zombies. He didn't want to freeze them to death, he only wanted to make them unable to move for a short period of time. Then, Gu Panpan was like a King Kong Barbie. All the ice sculptures would quickly break under her hands. Then Gu Chuan used ice in his left hand and water in his right hand. As long as the water dragon was released, Yan Hanqing's lightning would immediately follow. After all, water could conduct electricity. Therefore, groups of zombies fell instantly. The scene was even more spectacular than Xiao Qing's. The group of superpowered people standing on the balcony purely as onlookers was speechless. They were chased by zombies and had nowhere to run. In the end, they could only wait for death. However, when these zombies encountered Xiao Qing and the others, they were unable to resist. There were at least 1,000 zombies, and the weakest one was at least 800. They were surrounded by a team of superpowered people and tortured like dead dogs. No wonder they could only be the lowest level superpowered people's team. Half an hour later, Gu Panpan and her friends began to clean up the battlefield. Cleaning up the battlefield was the most annoying job, because the zombies all over the ground were smelly. She had to cut open their heads and take out their nuclei. In the end, Gu Panpan didn't even look at the lowest level zombies. She would only take out the nuclei of those at least second-level zombies. After taking out the nuclei, Xiao Qing roughly pointed at them and left with her friends. At this time, the rescued team of superpowered people realized that they hadn't thanked Xiao Qing yet. At this moment, Xiao Qing had already taken her friends back. They had almost collected enough contribution points. On the way back, they should be able to clean up some zombies. Chapter 369. This time, if the base still found an excuse, she would leave directly. At most, she would go to the capital to be a temporary resident. Anyway, the capital wouldn't chase them away. It was just a household registration. It wouldn't be a problem. At most, every time she left the capital and returned, the procedures would be slightly more troublesome. That was all. The staff member was very shocked that Xiao Qing and the others returned so quickly. She was very clear about how many zombies those contribution points represented. Many people who tried to change their household registration would be scared away by the contribution points. As for Xiao Qing, how long had she left? She definitely didn't have enough contribution points. Then Xiao Qing clapped her hands. Gu Panpan and the others each carried a sack over. They opened the sacks and poured out a pile of nuclei. How many nuclei could 4 or 5 sacks hold? Anyway, there was a small mountain on the ground. The people who were doing other things around were also shocked. They all turned their heads and stared at Xiao Qing. Their jaws dropped. How many nuclei were there? How many zombies did they kill? Let's count. Xiao Qing found a chair and sat down. Then she lazily raised her chin. If it's not enough, I still have more. The staff member was silent for a long time. Then she called a few other idle people to count together. They counted for nearly an hour. Everyone counted until their backs were sore and their eyes were blurry. At the last number, the staff member was also stuck. Because the nuclei in front of her were not only enough for the contribution points, but also far exceeded the requirements. Something like this had never happened before. She actually didn't know what to do next. Since the contribution points are enough, then help us cancel our household registration. Xiao Qing said lightly. The staff member's hands were numb. She couldn't ask her superior. After hesitating for a long time, she took action and cancelled the household registration of Xiao Qing and the others. Xiao Qing waved her hand again. Those nuclei were collected. Xiao Qing, who was free, felt that the air was much fresher. She stretched lazily and brought her friends back to pack their things. She also brought Fu Jingma along. When she stepped out of the gate of the base, Xiao Qing was still a little dazed. This was the first base she had lived in. She used to have a home here. But now, she had no choice but to give up this home and start over somewhere else. Along the way, Fu Jingma was quite silent. However, he was very nimble. He often helped Yan Hanqing with cooking and helping out. Even if Xiao Qing didn't like him, she had to admit that Fu Jingma was a decent person. At least, no one could find fault with him. After leaving the base, Xiao Qing and the others rushed to the capital at full speed. It only took them half the usual time to reach the capital. Old Master Qin had already sent someone to wait at the gate of the capital city. As soon as Xiao Qing arrived, that person ran back to report. Hence, when Xiao Qing and the others arrived at the gate of the Qin residence, Old Master Qin was already waiting there. He went up and hugged Little Bun. My baby, let Grandpa see. Have you lost weight in the past 2 days? Little Bun puffed up his cheeks. I haven't lost weight. Grandpa, look. I'm fat and spicy. The old man was amused. Although he really wanted Xiao Qing and the others to continue living in the Qin residence, he knew that Xiao Qing couldn't stay there forever. Hence, Old Master Qin directly said, I've already found a house for you. Do you want to eat first or look at the house first? Xiao Qing immediately said, let's go look at the house first. Old Master Qin personally brought Xiao Qing and the others to look at the house. The house that Old Master Qin found was not far from the Qin residence. It only took 3 to 5 minutes to walk. From the outside, it looked like a courtyard house. However, there was something special inside. There was a flower bed and a 2-story bungalow. It looked very nice. Chapter 370. At the very least, it suited Xiao Qing's taste. She looked around and saw that there were some common flowers planted in the flower bed. After eating, she could take a walk around the flower bed to relax. In the middle were 3 small buildings in a triangular shape. Whether it was the decoration or the space, they were all very good. After buying some new bedding, she could move in directly. You only need a level 120 crystal core to buy it. Old Master Qin stroked his beard and said proudly, "This is my old friend's house. I haven't lived in it many times, and almost everything is new." Xiao Qing handed the crystal core to Old Master Qin without hesitation and said, "I've really troubled you this time. I'll treat you to a meal when you're free." "You don't have to. Just treat me to a meal today," the old man blinked his eyes and said bluntly. Xiao Qing laughed involuntarily and said, "Okay." Moving to a new house naturally had to be celebrated. Xiao Qing first took people out to buy new bedding and some vegetables and fruits. She decided to celebrate tonight. No matter what, moving to a new place was worth celebrating. That night, Yan Hanqing cooked a table full of dishes and brought Old Master Qin to celebrate moving. Moving was a big event, so when they celebrated, they couldn't help but drink some wine. In the end, they collapsed all over the floor. Xiao Qing didn't drink much, so she was still relatively sober. She sat by the side and chatted with Old Master Qin. Old Master Qin went straight to the point. "I sent a group of people to keep an eye on the demonic mercenary group all day. In the end, I really found something." Xiao Qing poured a cup of tea for Old Master Qin to sober up and asked, "What did you find?" Old Master Qin stood up and said as he walked, "After learning of the source of the smoke, I sent people to keep an eye on the demonic mercenary group all day and night, afraid that they would do something against human morality. Then, news came from there. At the very least, they have the intention to do that thing." Old Master Qin said with an ugly expression, "I'm really worried that they'll use living people." Xiao Qing knocked on the table and said, "This matter needs to be observed for a while before we can be sure. What I'm most worried about right now is that they might already be making other chemical weapons. Let's wait and see." Old Master Qin sighed, "If we discover that the demonic berserk mercenary group is a malignant tumor, I will definitely bring my men to flatten it. I'll pay attention to it too. I have a feeling that things can't be that simple." Xiao Qing said helplessly. It wasn't that she always had bad intentions and always wondered why those people didn't make a move. It was just that some things were better prepared for a rainy day. Especially since Mad Demon had a grudge against her. She was someone who bore grudges. The vengeful Xiao Qing rubbed her chin and prepared to pay attention to Mad Demon's movements at all times. After putting this matter aside, Xiao Qing chatted with Old Master Qin for a long time about the little bun's daily life. She also learned that Qin Zishi had gone out to do a mission again. After all, Qin Zishi was the only child of the Qin family. In the future, he would definitely take over the Qin family's current power. If he didn't have some ability, he wouldn't be able to control the situation and support the Qin family. At this point, Old Master Qin was a little melancholic. In his life, he had experienced ups and downs. It could be said that he was proud of his life. In his old age, his son was quite filial and his grandson was also obedient. There was only one thing that stuck in his heart. That was that his son and grandson were like enemies all day long, but there were some things that he couldn't say. He couldn't blame his son for remarrying after his wife died, right? Or blame his grandson for refusing to accept a stepmother. In the end, the relationship between his son and grandson became more and more strained day by day. Old Master Qin was so worried that his hair had already turned white. Usually, he wouldn't say these things to Xiao Qing. However, today, after drinking a little, he let go. He patted Shao Qing's shoulder and sighed. I've never seen Shao Shi so close to anyone. Ah Qing, if you have the chance, help me persuade him. How can a good father and son live like enemies? I'll remember. Shao Qing supported old Master Qin and sent him home. Only then did she heave a sigh of relief. She had come back to torment her family. The one who drank the most was Gu Panpan. The others didn't drink much, but unfortunately, they couldn't hold their liquor well. Thus, only Dai and Yan Hanqing were still standing. Even Gu Chuan sat on the sofa in a daze. His face was expressionless, but there was a red cloud on his cheeks. He looked as if nothing had happened, but in fact, he was so drunk that he couldn't tell north from south. In the end, Yan Hanqing was responsible for taking care of Gu Chuan in the room. As she was underage, Xiao Tong, who wasn't allowed to drink, took care of Gu Panpan. The little bun was thrown to Dai. Shao Qing carried Yan Qiue upstairs. Chapter 371. As long as her enemy was having a hard time, she would have a good time. With this mentality, Shao Qing deliberately walked over, ready to see what was going on. One side was undoubtedly the members of the demonic mercenary group, while the other side was a man and a woman. There was even a stall on the ground, selling bits and pieces. Shao Qing didn't need to look to know that it was most likely related to protection fees. She leaned closer to listen. The woman was scolding, "How black-hearted are you? I only earn a few crystal cores a day, and you want half of it. Do you still want me to live?" The person from the demonic mercenary group said, "Everyone is doing business outside. We take people's money and eliminate people's disasters. You're not the only one who pays protection fees. Why do you think it's too much?" The woman sneered and said, "We don't need your protection, okay? I won't pay this protection fee." The leader of the demonic mercenary group sized him up and said with a lewd smile, "It doesn't matter if you don't pay. Pay with your body. Let us brothers do you once, and this month's protection fee will be waived." The woman spat and covered her chest vigilantly. She pursed her lips tightly. She had several orphans to raise in her family. The money she earned from running a stall was only enough to feed the children in her family. When the harvest was good, she could even add some meat to the children in her family. However, these people clearly saw that they were easy to bully. They opened their mouths and wanted to take half of the profits. If these crystal cores were handed over, those children would starve. Therefore, no matter what, the woman was unwilling to compromise. When the man beside her saw this, he hurriedly said, "Isn't it just protection fees? We'll pay." He gritted his teeth and smiled apologetically, "Women have long hair and short knowledge. Don't lower yourself to his level. I'll hand it over right now." He opened his pocket and counted for a long time. He counted 10 crystal cores and was about to hand them over to the demonic mercenary group when the woman's eyes turned red. She snatched the crystal cores and said aggrievedly, "I can't give them to them. Don't forget, little Yang is still sick. I'm counting on today's income to buy him something good to nourish his body. Wan, give me the crystal core." The man hurriedly urged her, but she just held on to the crystal core and refused to give it to him. She didn't give it to him, but instead, it was in line with the demonic mercenary group's thoughts. He smiled and said, "Since you don't want to give me the crystal core, then you can use your body to pay for it." The man hurriedly said, "I'll give it to you right away." Then, he started arguing with the woman. The person from the demonic berserk mercenary group waved his hand indifferently and said, "I'll tell you today. Regardless of whether you give it to us or not, we'll definitely play with this woman." He clapped his hands and said, "Brothers, let's go. We'll have meat in a while, and everyone will have a share." The members of Mad Demon beside him began to jeer excitedly and slowly approached the two of them. The man's expression immediately changed. He shielded the woman behind him and looked at them warily. Seeing that they were really going to do something bad to the woman, the man whispered to the woman, "If the situation turns bad, I'll stop them. You run quickly." The woman grabbed the man's sleeve and gritted her teeth. "It's broad daylight, and there's a patrol team from the capital. How dare you? I'll let you see if we dare." The captain of the demonic berserk mercenary group took a step forward and pushed the man away. He was about to pull the woman into his embrace. The woman retreated in shock. The man hurriedly went forward to stop her. As he stopped her, he shouted, "Run!" At this moment, the remaining members of the demonic berserk mercenary group had already surrounded him. They pressed the man to the ground and punched and kicked him. As for the captain, he grabbed the woman and pulled her into his embrace. The woman tried to resist, but he easily grabbed her hands and wantonly took advantage of her. Chapter 372. The woman's eyes were red from the humiliation. She kept struggling and looked at the people around her for help. However, the people around her did not help her. Instead, they were watching the show. Some of them were even whispering. The patrol team of the capital city passed by. When they saw that it was Mad Devil's men, they left without stopping for a second. Mad Devil's men laughed wildly. The woman's beautiful eyes were filled with tears. Xiao Qing frowned. She did not expect Mad Devil's men to be so arrogant in the capital city. She also did not expect that people's hearts were so cold. Mad Devil's men molested a woman in front of so many people, but no onlookers helped her. Listening to their words, someone even said, "I asked her to pay the protection fee, but she didn't. I think she's just a slut. She's still hoping to be raped by others." Xiao Qing's eyes dropped to the freezing point. Finally, she took a step forward and quickly waved a vine. It wrapped around the woman's waist and pulled her into her arms. Xiao Qing withdrew the vine and hugged the woman in her arms. She covered her torn collar and said faintly, "It's not good to do this to a girl on the street." Mad Devil's man spat and said, "Who's the brave one who dares to meddle in my business?" Then he looked up and saw that it was Xiao Qing. He had seen Xiao Qing and also saw Xiao Qing beat up the masters of his regiment. His angry face suddenly turned into a warm smile. "I was wondering who it was. It's Captain Xiao. What can I do for you, Captain Xiao?" The onlookers were originally gloating over Xiao Qing's misfortune, waiting to see Xiao Qing suffer, but now their jaws dropped to the ground. Xiao Qing glanced at the man who was still being beaten and said, "Ask your men to stop first." The man smiled carelessly and waved his hand. "Okay, I'll give you face." "Stop, stop." When those people stopped, the man on the ground got up with a limp. He wiped the corner of his mouth and stood beside Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing patted the back of the woman in her arms, and then said faintly, "It's just a small matter. Why do you have to make such a fuss? It won't look good. Why don't we just call it quits? My face should still carry some weight. Since Captain Xiao has stepped in, then let's forget about this matter. Captain Xiao, if you're free, why don't you come visit our regiment? Our regiment commander still misses you," that person said with a smile. Xiao Qing faintly responded, "I'll go when I'm free." That person cupped his hands and left with his men. He was a decisive person. He knew that he couldn't win against Xiao Qing, so he might as well give face to Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing wasn't going to give him face. Xiao Qing narrowed her eyes slightly. She was already considering whether to follow them later and see if she could kill them all. After Mad Demon's men left, Xiao Qing coldly glanced around and said, "Let's all go. Don't look at what you shouldn't look at. Otherwise, your eyeballs will run away." Those people saw that even Mad Demon's men didn't want to offend Xiao Qing, so they didn't dare to offend her. They immediately dispersed and did what they were supposed to do. Xiao Qing took off her coat and put it on the woman. Then she said faintly, "Okay, it's fine now. Let's go back. The woman clung to Xiao Qing's shoulder and wailed. Her towering breasts pressed against Xiao Qing's chest, making it difficult for her to breathe. She patted the woman's back and comforted her with great difficulty. The woman hugged her coat and thanked her softly. She was really grateful to Xiao Qing. If Xiao Qing hadn't spoken up for her, she might have been violated in public today. Chapter 373. It would be better for her to die immediately. Xiao Qing patted her shoulder and didn't say anything. Before she left, the woman insisted on giving Xiao Qing all the things in the stall. However, Xiao Qing didn't accept it. She had heard clearly that the woman had many orphans in her family. She guessed that she lived a hard life. How could she accept her things? However, the woman was very insistent and insisted on stuffing everything to Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing had no choice but to accept it. Then, she stuffed a handful of crystal cores into the woman's hands and ran away while the woman was not paying attention. She knew that the woman wouldn't accept it, so she decided to run away. After she ran away with air dye, she put the things the woman gave her and the things she bought into the telepathic eye space. Then, she entered the city to find Mad Devil's group. However, Xiao Qing found that Mad Devil's group didn't leave after they entered the city. Instead, they hid in a corner and scattered. She wanted to find a place where no one could see them and stop them. Unexpectedly, they stopped. Xiao Qing had to hide with air dye to see what they were going to do. Xiao Qing and air dye waited in the dark for a while. Soon, they saw the woman and the man coming in. As the woman walked, she thought about what to buy for her children. Before the apocalypse, she was the caretaker of an orphanage. During the apocalypse, the children in the orphanage either died or went missing. In the end, only 6 or 7 of them were left, and she brought them to the capital. She and her brother were very caring and responsible. Every day, they went out early and came back late to earn crystal nuclei to feed the children. Fortunately, the children were very obedient and well-behaved. Every time she came back home, the children had already cleaned the house and were waiting for her. They went to the market first and bought some meat and vegetables at a reduced price. These vegetables weren't fresh, so they were much cheaper. After that, they turned left and right, preparing to go home. Because their house was in a remote place, they turned into a small alley. Mad Devil's group immediately followed them. Xiao Qing suddenly realized that they hadn't given up. It was good that they were fine. She was still thinking about how to find a place where no one could see and take care of all these scumbags. The woman and the man walked in front, while the mad demon people walked behind them. Xiao Qing and the others sat and waited for them to make their move. The more they walked, the more remote they became. Finally, they walked into a deserted alley with no one in sight. Xiao Qing was waiting for this moment. When Mad Devil's group rushed forward and tried to drag the woman away quickly, Xiao Qing and Air Dai attacked. Air Dai's nails were sharp. He quickly jumped into the crowd. With a slash of his finger, he could slit a person's throat. Xiao Qing also held a military knife. Then vines drilled out of the ground and tied people up. She held a knife and went up to kill people. Not to mention the captain of Mad Devil, even the woman and the man were stunned. Then, they watched their heads fall to the ground one by one. Blood gushed out from their necks and flowed to the ground in an instant, dyeing the ground red. Xiao Qing didn't even give them a chance to speak. She had already killed all of them. The captain of Mad Devil's group saw that the situation was not good. He wanted to run away, but Xiao Qing stretched out her hand and whipped his head. Xiao Qing was very fast. The man and the woman could only see the cold light flashing. In a few minutes, the ground was covered with corpses. After all, with her current strength, killing these few dregs was like cutting grass. If the grass was a little sharper, she might even be able to cut her fingers. However, this group of people couldn't even touch the corner of her clothes. Chapter 374. The woman was stunned. She probably didn't expect Mad Demon's men to tail them, nor did she expect Xiaoqing to keep an eye on this group of people. She stuttered for a long time before saying, "We're almost at my door. Do you want to come in and have a seat?" Xiaoqing wasn't prepared to go in, but seeing the woman's expectant eyes, she thought for a moment and nodded. Okay. The two followed the woman into her house. They weren't so poor that they had to live in tents. They could still afford to live in a bungalow, but it was a little cramped. As soon as the woman returned home, the group of children surrounded her and shouted. The woman touched their heads one by one and said, "These children are all orphans. They have no one to rely on. It's quite pitiful. Now we rely on each other." She asked the children to call Xiaoqing aunt one by one. The group of children was very obedient. Xiaoqing touched the children's heads and felt very emotional. Looking at these children reminded her of when she was young. Then the woman bought some fruits and distributed them to the children. The fruits she bought were all artificially cultivated in the base. The leftover fruits either had scars or wilted. Anyway, they weren't easy to sell. The stall owner recognized her and sympathized with her, so he sold them to her at a cheap price. At this age, the children lacked vitamins and the like. Eating fruits often was good for their health. Therefore, she often bought some fruits when she went home. Even if they were cheap, the children were very happy. After the children received the fruits, they couldn't bear to eat them. They nibbled on them in small bites. After nibbling, they first licked their teeth and then licked the places where they had bitten. An apple could be eaten for a long time. The leader of the children looked slightly older than the others. He was expressionless as he stuffed the last apple to the woman. Then he whispered, "I don't like to eat this. You eat it." The woman didn't eat it. She just wiped it and stuffed it back to him. Her eyes were red. "Eat it. I've already eaten." Xiaoqing's heart ached when she saw this. It wasn't easy for her and her brother to take care of this group of children. They must have suffered a lot. Xiaoqing flipped through her space and didn't find anything suitable. She only found some candy for the little buns. She took out some and distributed them to the children. The children's eyes were filled with joy and longing, but none of them reached out to take it. They were all very well behaved. Xiaoqing could only say, "Take it and eat. Don't stand on ceremony." The children all looked at the woman. The woman had just been saved by Xiaoqing more than once. She hadn't even repaid her life-saving grace. How could she have the nerve to take Xiaoqing's things? Not to mention candy, which was already considered a rare child snack. She hurriedly refused, "We can't accept it. Benefactor, you should take it back and give it to the child." Xiaoqing said faintly, "I'm giving it to the children, not you. Why are you refusing? Come, take it. It's not much, just one piece per person." The woman could only say, "All right, take it. Why aren't you thanking Auntie?" The children were all very excited. They were reluctant to eat the candy and held it carefully. Xiaoqing sat for a while. Seeing that the sky was getting dark, she said, "I still have something to do. I'll leave first. If there's a chance in the future, I'll come to see you." "Benefactor, you're not staying for dinner." The woman bit her lower lip and said disappointedly, "My cooking skills are very good." Xiaoqing shook her head, "I still have something to do." Then, she left with air dye. When she left, the woman and the man took the children to send her off. After Xiaoqing left, the first thing she did was to dispose of the corpses. The corpses were too close to the woman's house. Today, outside the city, the woman had a conflict with Mad Demon's people. Xiaoqing was worried that Mad Demon's people would find out about her. So, she specially cleaned up the scene and destroyed the corpses. At least, she didn't want to implicate them. After leaving, Xiaoqing touched her chin and pondered. She had heard the Mad Demon's team leader say something. Originally, it was like this. Someone beside him suggested to fry the woman first and then kill her. However, he sneered and said, "She made me lose face. How can I let her die so easily? Aren't we lacking 2 test subjects? I'll just use her to make up the numbers." Could the test subjects here be related to the previous chemical weapons? Chapter 375. If it was really as she thought, Mad Demon would definitely be conducting live experiments behind the scenes. Perhaps that chemical weapon was just a byproduct of their experiments. Xiao Qing rubbed her chin, her gaze a little cold. She felt that there was definitely something fishy about this. However, no matter what kind of experiment it was, Mad Demon would definitely cover it up tightly and not let others find out. Without accurate evidence, the Mad Demons would never admit that they had done such a thing. What was the evidence? At the very least, she had to find the place where the Mad Demon mercenary group did this experiment and expose this place to the entire capital. After all, the Mad Demon mercenary group had a very deep foundation in the capital. Moreover, Wu Buping alone would definitely not dare to get involved in live experiments. There must be someone else behind him. This person was very likely to be a high-ranking official in the capital. At the very least, he was at the level of the Qin family. Otherwise, he would definitely not be able to withstand it. If that was the case, then it would be troublesome. Xiao Qing did not stay outside for long. She went back with her air dye. After returning, she first put down the things she bought and let Yan Hanqing arrange them first. Then, she went to the Qin family alone. She found old Master Qin and chatted for a long time. When she left, both of their expressions were very heavy. Even when Xiao Qing went back to eat hot pot, she did not relax at all. This kind of heaviness remained until lunch break, when Yan Qiue massaged her shoulders. Yan Qiue also noticed that something was wrong with Xiao Qing, so she deliberately asked, "What's wrong with you today? Isn't it a happy thing to move to a new house?" Xiao Qing simply told Yan Qiue about the matter and expressed her concerns. Yan Qiue laughed at that time. Even if the sky collapses, there are still tall people to hold it up. Why are you so worried? If Mad Demon is really conducting live experiments behind the scenes, then at least the Qin family is the one who has to deal with Mad Demon, right? As long as this matter is exposed, Mad Demon will be hated by everyone. You don't have to bear it alone. Besides, even if there is some powerful person behind him, so what? No matter how powerful he is, can he be the enemy of the entire country? To put it bluntly, what do you care about? The worst-case scenario is that we have to leave this place. We have people and food, so we can find a quiet place where we won't be disturbed and live in seclusion for the rest of our lives, Yan Qiue said half-jokingly. When the time comes, Air Dai and I will warm your bed. Isn't that great? Xiao Qing's originally worried mood was also disturbed by him. She immediately laughed and said, "You're right, I'm thinking too much. But can you take your hand away from my chest?" Yan Qiue moved her hand away from Xiao Qing's chest and said calmly, "I just saw a strand of hair. I've already taken it off." Then, he was kicked off the bed by Xiao Qing. Air Dai immediately occupied Xiao Qing's arms and acted cute. After being enlightened by Yan Qiue, Xiao Qing naturally put those troublesome things behind her and focused on strengthening her ability. Now that she was at level 5, she could find another mutated plant to subdue. Currently, the mutated plants in her hands were vines, man-eating flowers, and dodder. Among them, the man-eating flowers were not very useful unless they were used to kill low-level zombies. The dodder was only suitable for dealing with humans. As for the auxiliary plant, it was more suitable for large-scale battles. Moreover, it could not be known. Once it was known, the enemy would be on guard and it would be useless. If she subdued another mutated plant, she would mainly consider the auxiliary plant, which could assist her teammates, or her own ability. Chapter 376. However, there was no need to rush. It all depended on fate. On the third day after moving into the new house, Old Master Qin sent a message saying that nothing unusual had been found. He had sent people to monitor the higher-ups of Mad Devil, but they hadn't found anything related to human experiments. However, when collecting information, the Qin family had discovered that many ordinary people had gone missing. These missing people often didn't have any relatives or friends, didn't have high status, or lived alone. Therefore, after they went missing, no one would look for them. After a while, the existence of these people had faded away. After all, it was the end of the world, and human lives were the most worthless. It was normal for a few people to go missing. Perhaps some paranormal didn't like you and killed you, and you wouldn't be able to complain. However, more and more people went missing, and some people with relatives also went missing. Only then did someone report the case. However, even if the case was reported, it would become an unsolved case because no one could find the missing people. Old Master Qin felt that this matter was very strange. Where did all the missing people go? Even if there were a few people who offended some powerful paranormal and were killed, it was impossible for all the thousands of people to offend paranormal, right? Old Master Qin's intuition told him that this matter might be related to Mad Devil. Xiao Qin also felt that it was related to Mad Devil. After all, if they wanted to do human experiments, they must have test subjects. So, where did the test subjects come from? These people who lived alone and didn't have any relatives or friends were very likely to become the prey of Mad Devil. After all, even if they went missing or died, no one would do anything for them. After reading the message that Old Master Qin gave her, Xiao Qin didn't have any clue. She contacted Zhu Mochen and prepared to go out with him. Zhu Mochen and Wu Buping had been at odds for a long time, so maybe he knew something. As soon as Xiao Qin said that she wanted to go out, two people followed her. One was Yan Qiue, and the other was Dai. When they heard that Xiao Qin wanted to go out with a man, they automatically ignored the man's name and insisted on going out with her. Xiao Qin couldn't do anything about it, so when she went out, she brought 2 pieces of sticky candy with her. Zhu Mochen had come by himself. They had arranged to meet at a small restaurant, so they could have a meal together. Then, when Zhu Mochen arrived, he saw that Xiao Qin was standing on either side of him. There wasn't the slightest hint of a private conversation going on. Xiao Qin helplessly invited Zhu Mochen to sit down and then handed him the menu. They didn't come out to eat, so Zhu Mochen ordered 2 of his favorite dishes and then returned the menu. After the waiter left, Xiao Qin chatted with Zhu Mochen about the things that had happened to her recently. However, she turned everything she had seen and heard into guesses. Then Xiao Qin said, "I called you out this time mainly to ask if you know anything about mad demons." Zhu Mochen thought for a moment, then said, "Because of many reasons, Mad Demon and I don't like each other. You should know that. The more hostile we are, the more we try to understand each other. I was like that for a period of time. I carefully studied Mad Demon, but I didn't find anything wrong with him until recently." "Who?" Xiao Qin asked curiously. "Guan Haishan. You probably don't know this name. He represented one of Mad Demon's 3 vice commanders, but he died a long time ago. However, I saw him again a while ago," Zhu Mochen said with a serious expression. "I felt that something was wrong at the time, but I didn't have time to verify that person's identity, so I couldn't confirm if he was really Guan Haishan." Chapter 377. When he said this, Xiao Qin also felt that something was wrong. She felt that there was something fishy about the appearance of a person who had already been declared dead. If Guan Haishan wasn't dead, then why did Mad Demon announce that Guan Haishan was dead? If Guan Haishan was dead, then the person who appeared now, who was it? After chatting with Zhu Mochen, Xiao Qin felt that her head hurt even more. This matter was too complicated. Immediately after, Xiaoqing was attacked on her way home. Because she didn't consider that she would be attacked on the streets of Jingdu, she didn't take any precautions. It was Dai, who had sharp senses, who was the first to pounce on her. When Xiaoqing looked up, she saw that there was a bullet hole where she was originally standing. This meant that a sniper was secretly aiming at her. If it wasn't for Dai, she would have been seriously injured at the very least. As soon as she found the bullet hole, Xiaoqing immediately pulled Yan Qiue and Dumbo and leaped onto the wall. Based on the shape of the bullet hole, she could almost guess the position of the sniper in the dark. Therefore, the wall facing the sniper was the safest. This was the same principle as the darkness under the light. Xiaoqing stuck close to the wall. After a long time, she suddenly rolled forward, exposing herself to the sniper's muzzle. She was already prepared to dodge, but the bullet didn't come. Dai was like a dexterous monkey. She quickly found the sniper's original position based on the angle of the bullet hole and other principles. However, there was only a slender bullet shell left. Someone tried to kill Xiaoqing. This knowledge made the three of them feel a little heavy. Then, who wanted to kill Xiaoqing? The most likely person was undoubtedly Wu Buping. First of all, she had previously ruined Wu Buping's plan. Then, she had a conflict with Mad Demon's people at the city gate in public. Most importantly, the people who had a conflict with her never returned to Mad Demon. They couldn't be found even if they were alive or dead. In terms of hatred, the one who wanted her to die the most was undoubtedly Mad Demon. Maybe someone had locked onto her when she just went out. That was the reason for the assassination attempt of fleeing thousands of miles away after failing to hit the target. This assassination could be said to be all bark and no bite, but it made Xiaoqing instantly vigilant. If a person like Wu Buping wanted someone to die, he would definitely do anything. This assassination was definitely not the end. It was just the beginning. Xiaoqing was in danger. "Let's go back first," Xiaoqing said expressionlessly. The few of them quickly left the scene, but they did not encounter a second assassination along the way. They told Gu Panpan and the others about this matter, hoping that they would be more careful when they went out. After all, they didn't know if the person in the dark would target Gu Panpan and the others after the assassination failed. It's most likely the Mad Demon mercenary group. Xiaoqing held her chin and said calmly, "After all, we don't have many enemies. The only one who urgently wants my life is probably Mad Demon." Xiaoqing said faintly, "I've been thinking about whether I should participate in the investigation of Mad Demon. At present, it seems that Mad Demon is not ready to give up on me. Strike first and gain the upper hand." Yan Hanqing calmly thought for a long time before saying, "If it's really Mad Demon who did this to you, then it means that they have a guilty conscience. If they have a guilty conscience, it's easy to reveal flaws." Xiaoqing nodded and said, "What I mean is, when everyone goes out, it's best to be careful. Try not to go out alone. Otherwise, I'm really worried." The few of them nodded and promised that they would try their best to stay at home for the next few days and not go out. After telling her friends, Xiaoqing also brought the news to Old Master Qin, hoping that with Old Master Qin's identity, he could find out something. After that, Xiaoqing was not plotted against or assassinated again. The assassination that day was like a flash in the pan, or even not a flash in the pan. She could almost confirm that the person who did this was indeed Mad Demon. After all, not everyone had the ability to assassinate her on the streets of the capital. Xiaoqing felt that being so passive was not her style. After thinking for a long time, she decided to lure the snake out of its hole. If she didn't kill this snake, she would be on tenterhooks when she took her friends out to do missions. She was worried that someone would jump out at this time to assassinate her or her friends. This was too passive. It was completely disadvantageous for her and her friends. However, luring the snake out of its hole was also a skill. Although the mad demon mercenary group was very powerful and dared to assassinate her on the streets of the capital, they definitely couldn't do anything in the capital. Therefore, Xiao Qing decided that she would go and be the bait. Soon, Old Master Qin provided her with a beautiful excuse to go out. Chapter 378. Old Master Qin had found some information about the Mad Devil Mercenary Group's secret experimental base. Although it was just a groundless accusation, it was just right to lure the snake out of its hole. In fact, at the very beginning, Old Master Qin refused to let Xiao Qing go out and take risks. He always felt that it was best for a girl like Xiao Qing to stay at home safely. It was too dangerous to lure the snake out of its hole. However, how could Xiao Qing stay at home safely? She refused Old Master Qin's kindness and only took 2 people with her, Yan Qiue and Er Dai. Originally, she didn't even plan to take Yan Qiue, but Yan Qiue insisted on following her. She couldn't do anything about it. The place they were going to this time wasn't too close to the capital. It was a base in the north of the capital. This base was very small, so small that it didn't even have a name. Occasionally, when people mentioned this base, they would say that there was a base in the north next to a forest. This base was so small, but it was such a small base that the Mad Devil Mercenary Group sent people there again and again. According to the information Old Master Qin gave her, there would be people from the Mad Devil Mercenary Group going to that small base every week. Sometimes it was on the surface, sometimes it was a small mercenary group that belonged to the Mad Devil Mercenary Group secretly. In short, there would always be people from the Mad Devil Mercenary Group going to that base 3 to 5 times a month. Such a small base, without any special products or places that others would pay attention to, why would it attract people from the Mad Devil Mercenary Group over and over again? Therefore, this base most likely had a problem. Of course, the most important thing was to lure the snake out of its hole. After Xiao Qing left the capital, she took Yan Qiue and Er Dai to the small base leisurely. The itinerary wasn't urgent. In addition, she was worried that if they walked too fast, the people following them would be shaken off. Therefore, she treated this trip as a vacation. She walked slowly, looked at the beautiful scenery, rested wherever she went, and cooked wherever she went. It was so beautiful that it didn't seem like the end of the world. The people who were following behind were gritting their teeth. They had already sent a message to their superiors. They had already set up an inescapable net in front of them and were waiting for Xiao Qing. However, Xiao Qing was leisurely. She didn't look like she was in a hurry, nor did she look like she was going to investigate. She looked like she was simply traveling. At night, Xiao Qing and the others would set up their tents and look for wild animals and vegetables nearby. They would eat different kinds of food every day. Today they would eat barbecue, tomorrow they would eat hot pot, and the day after tomorrow they would eat several dishes with white rice. What about them? He dared not sleep at night, for fear that Xiao Qing and the others would disappear when he opened his eyes. While Xiao Qing and the others were eating delicacies, the few of them were gnawing on dry food. In fact, they used to eat hardtack and dry food that was hard enough to break their teeth. At that time, they didn't feel too bad and were used to eating it. However, when there was a comparison, there would be hurt. Especially when the fragrance of Xiao Qing's cooking drifted to the tip of their nose, the days of gnawing on dry food were particularly unbearable. The few of them couldn't wait to tear apart Xiao Qing and the others alive. If you have the ability to wander around, then leave quickly if you have the ability. If you have the ability to investigate, then do it properly if you have the ability to do so. Originally, the few of them thought that this job was very simple and easy. They bit on the dry food and almost cried. When they thought that they would have to live like this for a few days, they felt even more sad. Xiao Qing and the others' days could be said to be very happy. For example, this afternoon, Er Dai caught several pheasants back. They didn't encounter any other wild animals. Xiao Qing thought about it and prepared chicken soup with rice. Chapter 379. The rice wasn't the kind that was grown in the bases, but the old rice that was left behind before the apocalypse. After the apocalypse, some researchers developed a drug that could allow the rice to be cooked 4 times a year. Since then, most of the bases no longer lacked food. At least, there would not be more people starving to death because they did not have enough food to eat. It could be said that most of the bases had enough food and clothing. This kind of rice tasted slightly worse than the rice from peacetime. However, in the apocalypse, being able to fill one's stomach was already the greatest gift from the heavens. Who would care if the rice tasted worse? However, for someone as picky as Xiaoqing, they would definitely eat the old rice from before the apocalypse. When she went out to do missions, she would pay attention to food. As long as there was food, she would put it into her little treasury. Of course, she would eat the best food for her family. After the pheasants were cleaned, Xiaoqing put a lot of mushrooms and wood ears into their stomachs and cooked them in a pot. There was no need to put too much seasoning. Only a little oil and salt, and then a little star anise was enough. After the rice was out of the pot, chicken soup was poured over it. The mushrooms in the pheasant stomachs were taken out as side dishes. Every grain of rice was wrapped in sparkling soup. It looked very appetizing. Those who were hiding in the dark were biting their own hands. They were about to cry. They also wanted to eat rice, drink chicken soup, and eat chicken. They did not want to eat hardtack. Especially when they smelled the rich aroma, they felt like they were chewing wax. They could not swallow it. After the apocalypse, who would bring pots and pans when they go out? Who would cook rice and stew chicken soup when they eat in the wild? It was so torturous. Most importantly, not only did they have to endure this kind of abuse, they also had to watch the 3 of them being lovey-dovey every day. Their eyes were going blind. Especially that guy called Yan Qiue. If he did not act coquettishly once in 3 minutes, there would be something wrong with his head. Have you ever seen such a coquettish man? After enduring for 5 whole days, they really wanted to rebel. If it wasn't for the fact that victory was right in front of them, they really wanted to jump out and let Xiaoqing give them a quick death. The only thing that supported them now was that they were getting closer and closer to the trap they had set up. As long as Xiaoqing and the others stepped into the trap, they would no longer have to suffer this kind of torture. On the 6th day, Xiaoqing finally arrived at the nameless base, the forest outside. She heard that there was a pond in the forest, and the water here was not polluted. There were even live fish inside. Xiaoqing was not interested in the pond. She led the 2 into the forest. As long as they passed through the forest, they would reach the nameless base. When they arrived at the base, they could take a shower, change their clothes, and have a good sleep. Xiaoqing was looking forward to it. She bit her nails and thought about what to eat for dinner. On the surface, she looked very relaxed, but in fact, the moment she stepped into the forest, her whole person became vigilant. Her whole body's muscles were tensed up to a perfect state, ready to attack at any time. If something unexpected happened, such as an assassin from the sky, she could react in an instant. As Xiaoqing walked forward, she suddenly smelled a faint fragrance. That fragrance was very faint, very light, and very pleasant to the nose. It was just like her autumn flowers, making people unknowingly fall for it. Xiaoqing's sense of smell was very good. The key was that she and Dai would not fall for it because they were zombies. Most of the poison was transmitted through blood, and the blood of zombies was pitifully small. Chapter 380. Moreover, all poisons targeted the human body. Zombies were just walking corpses. How could they be afraid of poisons? However, Yan Qiue was different. He was a living person. Among the 3 of them, he was the only one who would be poisoned. While Yan Qiue was walking, he was suddenly stopped by Xiaoqing. Then, Xiaoqing kissed him. Without any warning, she kissed him. Yan Qiue was stunned. His heart was filled with joy like fireworks. It filled his brain and his heart. His blood flowed faster, like a torrent hitting a reef. Then, something was pushed into his mouth by the tip of her soft tongue. Yan Qiue was stunned. He silently swallowed the thing. It was the antidote he made. In order to seal it well, he sealed it in a candy-like shell and turned it into a colorful ball. This time, it was Dai who almost went crazy. He screamed and pulled Xiaoqing. He looked at Xiaoqing with grievance. How could Xiaoqing kiss someone else? She didn't even kiss him. Xiaoqing felt guilty under his gaze. Even if she had a legitimate reason for her actions just now, she still felt guilty. In the end, she couldn't help but lean over and kiss Dumbo. After all, she should be fair. Dai was comforted. He held Xiaoqing's hand tightly. The people who were following them thought, "Fuck, it's too much. Let's go." Xiaoqing fed the antidote to Yan Qiue and heaved a sigh of relief. She continued to lead the two people deeper into the cave. The fragrance gradually faded. When the fragrance was almost faintly discernible, Xiaoqing stopped. "What's wrong?" Yan Qiue also stopped and asked in a low voice. Xiaoqing didn't say anything. She looked around and then picked up a thick branch. She poked the ground one step ahead. Then, the ground collapsed, the pit and the sharp blades at the bottom of the pit were exposed. Yan Qiue looked at the row of sharp blades and couldn't help but feel cold. The few of you are sneakily hiding in the dark and using such despicable methods. It is truly laughable. You dare to scheme against me, but don't tell me you don't dare to come out and see me. Xiaoqing coldly said. As soon as she finished speaking, a big net suddenly flew towards them. Xiaoqing hurriedly pulled Yan Qiue and Dai. The three of them rolled on the ground and went under the net. Dozens of paranormals came out from all over the place, forming an encirclement. The ones who acted faster were the long-range paranormals who were still hiding in the dark. Before the dozens of paranormals could get close to Xiaoqing, countless icicles, earth thorns, fireballs, wind blades, and water columns had already enveloped Xiaoqing and the others. Xiaoqing raised her hands. Vines weaved into a thick net, covering the three of them. No matter how fierce those paranormals were, they couldn't break the net and fall on their heads. At this time, the dozens of paranormals were close to them. One of the fastest paranormals had already rolled in front of Xiaoqing. He thrust two ice blades forward and stabbed toward Xiaoqing's stomach. Dai stretched out his foot and stepped on the man's hand easily. Then, he kicked the man's head off his neck with his other foot. No one knew how much strength Dai used, but he kicked the man's head off his neck. His head was almost torn off while he was still alive. Blood spurted out like a fountain and dyed Xiaoqing's trousers red. Xiaoqing's hand gesture changed, and the net of vines above her head instantly dispersed, turning into vines that spread out in all directions. Mad Demon had really put in a lot of effort this time. Among the paranormals who came to surround her, each of them was at least a level 3 paranormals, and a few of them had reached level 4. Don't forget that there were also those long-range paranormals hiding in the dark. Their strength was definitely not weaker than the 20 or so paranormals. Chapter 381. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to withstand such a lineup. Even those paranormals who thought they were the best paranormals in the country and the world wouldn't be able to survive if they fell into such an ambush. Just by looking at this lineup, it really felt like killing a chicken with a butcher's knife. However, they weren't destined to be butcher's knife, and Xiaoqing wouldn't be the chicken waiting to be slaughtered. As soon as the ambushers rushed up, they found that Xiaoqing's vines were very scary. 3 of the weakest paranormals were pierced through by several vines. The vines shook lazily, and one of their corpses was torn apart and scattered on the ground. Those with higher levels could still fight, but don't forget that Xiaoqing wasn't alone. Yan Qiue and Air Dai were beside her. Air Dai reacted the fastest. He jumped up and didn't go far. He just stood beside Xiaoqing and harvested their heads under the cover of the vines. Yan Qiue was even more domineering. He stood still beside Xiaoqing like a mountain, his hands shaking as if he was conducting an orchestra. He waved his hands up and down, and from time to time, someone was squeezed into a meat patty by his ability to control the air. Those people looked at him. No. They had to get rid of Yan Qiue first, so that they could fight Xiaoqing head-on. Then, they found that they couldn't even get close to Xiaoqing. The octopus-like vines almost filled the space around Xiaoqing. Occasionally, there were two paranormals who escaped and broke through the blockade of the vines. Air Dai was responsible for harvesting their heads. They had lost several lives, but they hadn't even touched the hem of Xiaoqing's clothes. The situation is tense. Retreat. Someone shouted in the dark, and those paranormals who had suddenly appeared retreated like a tide. But would Xiaoqing let them go? What a joke. They wanted to assassinate her, so they came to kill her. But when they saw that they couldn't win, they ran away. How could there be such a good thing in the world? Stay here. Xiaoqing sneered. The vines in her hand were like living pythons, choosing people to devour. As long as they were targeted, they would not be able to escape. One of them was a level 4 wind elementalist. His speed was extremely fast, and when he couldn't avoid it, he could even glide for a short time. He thought he could escape, but a vine suddenly wrapped around his ankle. The vines only tugged at him, temporarily immobilizing him. This immobilizing time was only about a second. What could he do in a second? He was able to make Air Dai appear behind him and tear his body apart. As a level 4 paranormal, he shouldn't have been killed so easily, but he had lost his will to fight. All he could think about was how to escape, and he didn't consider that he was stronger than Air Dai. In addition, he thought that he had escaped from a hopeless situation and relaxed. Suddenly, he was killed by Air Dai, who was weaker than him. On the other side, Xiaoqing didn't plan to let anyone go. She pretended to be poisoned and said in a low voice, "Let them go." Then, her body swayed weakly. Air Dai and Yan Qiue immediately returned to her side. Yan Qiue's acting was the worst. He held his forehead and collapsed on Xiaoqing's body. "Ah. I'm a little dizzy." Xiaoqing couldn't help but twitch her mouth. She pretended to be, I'm poisoned. The poison is so strong, but I have to pretend that I'm not poisoned. That person didn't go far. After all, they still had the poison as their trump card. Seeing that Xiaoqing and Yan Qiue were really poisoned, those people became restless again. The leader waved his hand and stopped everyone from leaving. Then, he quietly brought his people back. He approached Xiaoqing and took a look. Xiaoqing's face was a little pale, and her body was a little swaying. She looked like she had been poisoned, but she was holding on and not letting herself show it. He was very surprised and didn't shout anymore. He immediately waved his hand. "Go. Here's the chance." Xiaoqing also waved her hand secretly. "Here's the chance. Don't let anyone escape." Chapter 382. After everyone entered Xiaoqing's attack range, Xiaoqing calmly clapped her hands. Countless vines drilled out of the ground. They were like bones walking in a graveyard. As long as it was a living person, they would quickly be entangled by the vines. The range was too large. Almost all of the assassins were within the range. The only one who was outside the range was scared stiff. Then, he was easily swallowed by the man-eating flower that drilled out from behind him. The man-eating flower was like a king patrolling his territory. It slowly moved among the people bound by the vines. Whenever it saw a prey, it would open its flower crown and swallow it. The flower was only so big, but after swallowing 6 or 7 people, it burped to show that it was full. Xiao Qing controlled the vines and quickly tightened them into the bodies of those people. There was also Yan Qiue on the side, who was responsible for the fish that escaped the net that almost broke free. After the poison was injected into those people's bodies through the thorns, it wouldn't be long before those living people became skin bags filled with countless liquids. The vines absorbed the liquids through the thorns. In the end, only a piece of useless human skin was left lying flat on the ground. This was a terrifying scene. If other people saw it, they would definitely be scared to the point of wetting their pants. However, Yan Qiue was so stimulated that he almost became aroused. He clung tightly to Xiao Qing's body and said as if he was dreaming, "Sometimes, I really want to be eaten by you and become one with you. Then, even if you don't like me, you won't be able to reject me." Xiao Qing smiled and showed two sharp canine teeth. "Get lost." He said it as if she had that kind of special hobby. Even if she was a zombie, she was a zombie that paid attention to her diet and health, okay? Only brainless beasts and those brainless zombies would eat people like humans, who looked good on the outside but emitted a rotten stench on the inside. Then, Xiao Qing cleaned up the scene. She didn't find anything that could prove the identity of these people. Shaking the man-eating flowers and vines, she took Yan Qiue and Air Dai to the entrance of the base. When they arrived at the entrance of the base, only Xiao Qing and Yan Qiue were left. Air Dai had already sneaked into the base. Although she was using the excuse of luring the snake out of its hole this time, she really came out to investigate. If she could find what she wanted, of course, it would be for the best. Mad Demon's men would definitely be keeping a close eye on her. The people in the base would also know in advance that she was coming. In that case, why not make her an existence like a target and attract everyone's attention? Then, let Dummy go in and investigate. As soon as Xiao Qing and Yan Qiue appeared at the gate of the base, the two guards who were lazily guarding the gate were so shocked that their eyeballs almost fell to the ground. They had already received the news that Xiao Qing had absolutely no chance to pass through the woods. However, not only did Xiao Qing come out, but she also appeared in front of them unscathed. How could they not be shocked and their eyeballs fell to the ground? However, they reacted quickly. One of them quickly turned around, probably running to report the news. The other one came up with a forced flattering expression, then said, "You two look very powerful superpowered people at first glance. May I know what business you have in our base?" Xiao Qing talked nonsense with a serious face. "We are here to travel." The corner of the man's mouth twitched. What's so good about traveling in this broken place? There were no mountains in front and no water behind, and it couldn't be any smaller. Why would normal people come here to travel? Chapter 383. Stop fooling around, okay? But he didn't dare to refute. After all, he felt guilty, so he said shamelessly, "Yes, yes, we have beautiful scenery here. There are many tourists here, ha 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 ha." The more he laughed, the more dry he became. In the end, he stopped. He probably couldn't lie anymore. Xiao Qing asked very kindly, "Is there any procedure to enter your base?" "No," he said reflexively. After saying that, he felt that his reaction was not right. After all, how could he let people in without checking? So he quickly made up for it. "You two are obviously powerful paranormals. If you are an ordinary person, you still need to be checked. You two don't need to." "That's great." Xiao Qing smiled and led Yan Qiue in. The moment Xiao Qing entered, the man leaned against the door frame. His legs were like noodles, and he was sweating profusely. Motherfucker. Motherfucker. It turns out that lying is so difficult. As soon as Xiao Qing led Yan Qiue in, they saw a few people coming toward them. The leader was a young man. He looked very handsome, especially his eyes, which were smart and cunning. As soon as he saw Xiao Qing, he strode to greet them. Oh, such powerful paranormals coming to our base is really a great honor. Please come in. What are you two doing in our base? Shao Qing continued to talk nonsense with a serious face. Traveling. Yan Qiue immediately added, honeymoon. The young man was much more shrewd than the gatekeeper. His smile didn't change, and then he said enthusiastically, if it's a trip, then it's best. You two must stay for a few more days. I'll show you around and see our place. You two can also tell me about the changes in the capital. I haven't been there for almost half a year. Shao Qing asked calmly, how do you know that we came from the capital? The young man was stunned for a moment, but he quickly reacted. He chuckled and said, powerful paranormals like you two, where else could you come from? Besides, coming from the south, there's an 80% to 90% chance that you'll have to pass through the capital, so I made a guess. Did I get it right? If you're right, there's no prize, Shao Qing said expressionlessly. Even the shrewd young man couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed because of Shao Qing's extremely cold and unoriginal joke. He laughed dryly and said, you're all my friends from afar. I'll treat you two to dinner tonight. You must come. Of course, the most important thing now is to arrange the accommodation for the two teams. Please follow me. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Guan Haishan. Shao Qing's gaze instantly sharpened. Guan Haishan? The person that Zhu Machin said had died many years ago. She couldn't help but take a closer look at Guan Haishan. He had delicate features and fair skin. If you ignored everything else and just looked at his appearance, he actually looked like a pretty boy. Thus, Shao Qing silently reached out and touched Guan Haishan's face. It was as fair and tender as it looked, with a hint of warmth. He didn't look like a dead person, and he definitely didn't look like someone who had died many years ago. Yan Qiue grabbed Shao Qing's hand and said with a bitter expression, didn't you say that you only love me? Why are you touching him? Isn't it good to touch me? Shao Qing continued to talk nonsense with a deadpan expression. There's a fly on his face. Guan Haishan was speechless. Then, Guan Haishan walked in with an expression that said, we're serious people. The accommodation that he arranged for Shao Qing and Yan Qiue was right next to his. It was the largest and most spacious place in the entire base aside from the base chief's residence. Chapter 384. Therefore, it was perfect to entertain the two guests. The main point was that he was the base chief. The dinner was on Guan Haishan, and it was quite sumptuous. During the banquet, Shao Qing had been observing Guan Haishan. Was Guan Haishan really the legendary Guan Haishan who had been dead for a long time? If so, how did he come back to life? Or was he not dead at all? If not, why did he carry Guan Haishan's name? If not for the fact that they were still in someone else's territory, Shao Qing would have dissected Guan Haishan to see what the hell he was. Although both sides had ulterior motives, the atmosphere of the meal was still harmonious. After the meal, Guan Haishan and Shao Qing talked about all kinds of things, and Yan Qiue was a little sleepy. Shao Qing carried Yan Qiue in a princess hug and said, my baby is sleepy. Let's talk another day. Then, she couldn't wait to get rid of Guan Haishan, this crazy chatterbox. Guan Haishan walked all the way to Shao Qing's room and almost followed in. In the end, Shao Qing slammed the door, and his nose was almost pinched off. When Shao Qing closed the door, she said very impolitely, I'm fine with talking about the scenery with you. Even if you want to hear me having sex with my baby, you want to hear it too. Guan Haishan, who was shut outside the door, rubbed his nose and walked back after a long time. After he returned to his room, he ordered his subordinates to carefully pay attention to Shao Qing's room. If there were any problems, they would immediately report to him. As for eavesdropping, he wasn't stupid. He didn't think that Shao Qing wouldn't notice if someone got so close. In fact, anyone who got close would be discovered by Shao Qing. She had planted several thin vines in the corner of the door. They were not noticeable at all among the weeds. These vines were equivalent to her eyes and ears, helping her to observe the movements around her. Once someone got close or eavesdropped, Xiao Qing would notice. After the arrangement, Xiao Qing carried Yan Qiuyue into the room. Then, she saw that the quilt on the bed was bulging. When she lifted it, Dai was hugging a pillow and looking at Xiao Qing with wet eyes. "How's the investigation going?" Xiao Qing threw Yan Qiuyue on the bed and said in disgust, "Go take a shower first." Then, she began to change the bed sheets and quilt. God knows what kind of people had slept on this bed before. She wouldn't be at ease if she didn't change the bed sheets and blankets. After changing the bed sheets and quilts, Dai proudly lay down in the new quilt. He talked about what he saw today with gestures and the tacit understanding between the two of them. Dai walked around the entire base and found 2 places that were heavily guarded. However, because it was daytime and there were too many people, and Xiao Qing had just entered the city, the security was even tighter. Therefore, Dai could not sneak in to check carefully. He checked the other places, such as Guan Haishan's bedroom. He found something very strange in Guan Haishan's bedroom. It was a pot of fresh blood. Dai checked it. The blood was very fresh. It was definitely released today. As for other suspicious things, he did not find anything for the time being. He planned to go out again at night. Xiao Qing touched Dai's head and said, "Don't go out tonight. Guan Haishan's security will be very tight. Wait until tomorrow. Qiuyue and I will trick Guan Haishan into taking us out for a walk. That will be your best chance." Dai nodded obediently. Then, he curled his slender body into a ball in Xiao Qing's arms. He even saw Xiao Qing carrying Yan Qiuyue back. Not happy. Baby has emotions. Chapter 385. Dai was obviously a little taller than Xiao Qing, but when he curled himself into a ball and stuffed himself into Xiao Qing's arms, he didn't feel weird at all. It was very harmonious. Xiao Qing had no choice but to hug him tightly as if she was hugging a large bun. Yan Qiuyue came back from the shower and saw this scene. He also snorted, then crawled under the blanket and hugged Xiao Qing from behind. Xiao Qing was like the sandwich in a biscuit, the piece of meat in a rujiamo. But it felt good to have a cool embrace and a warm back. Xiao Qing didn't fall asleep immediately. She thought for a while and felt more and more suspicious. Why would there be a pot of fresh blood in Guan Haishan's room? Why would he need blood? Xiao Qing wasn't so anxious at first, but now she was anxious to know how Guan Haishan died. Was this Guan Haishan really the dead Guan Haishan? She thought for a long time. When the moon was high in the sky, Yan Qiuyue couldn't help but cover her eyes and let her sleep. Xiao Qing closed her eyes, and then the 3 of them fell asleep. The next morning, someone approached. Xiao Qing was awakened by the small vines planted at the door. She patted Dai's butt and asked him to quickly put on his clothes and find a place to hide. Then she turned over and didn't plan to get up. Poor Dai had no choice but to crawl out of the warm bed by himself and find a corner to hide. The person who came early in the morning was Guan Haishan. Xiao Qing saw him through the vines, but she stretched under the blanket and didn't have any desire to get up. It was so early, and she really didn't want to wake up. She wanted to sleep a little longer, especially when she was in his arms. Then Guan Haishan knocked on the door. Xiao Qing said lazily, "What's the matter? If you have something to say, come in. The door isn't closed. If you don't have anything to say, leave. I still want to sleep for a while." Then, Guan Haishan pushed open the door and entered. He walked past the courtyard and through the hall. The moment he stuck his head out, he saw Xiao Qing lying under the blanket. Only her fair arms were still exposed. Yan Qiue was resting on Shao Qing's arms with a languid expression. A word popped into Guan Haishan's mind: dog. Male. Female. This kind of adulterous couple who flaunted their affection every day should really be dragged out and burned to death. Shao Qing didn't feel shy at all. She stretched her head and asked lazily, "What's the matter, base Chief Guan?" Guan Haishan smiled and said, "Didn't I tell you last night during dinner that I was going to take you two out for a walk today? I felt like we were old friends at first sight and felt like we had known each other in our previous lives, so I couldn't wait to come and find you." Shao Qing touched her chin and said, "Base Chief Guan, I also feel like we've known each other for a long time. I feel like I used to visit prostitutes in the nightclub before. Ahem, I met a handsome young man who looked like you." Guan Haishan's face darkened, but then returned to normal. He said with a smile, "Is that so?" Shao Qing crossed her legs under the blanket and hugged Yan Qiue. She said with a reminiscing expression, "That handsome young man was quite handsome, but he looked like a silver spear wax, so he left a deep impression on me." Guan Haishan's face completely darkened. After a long while, he laughed and said, "It's not appropriate to keep chatting like this. I'll wait outside. After you two finish washing up, we'll go eat first, and then go out for a stroll." Then, he went out like a small whirlwind. Yan Qiue held back his laughter for a long time, then leaned his head on Shao Qing's shoulder and laughed. After laughing for a long time, he said to Shao Qing, "Your words were quite harsh." It was satisfying. Chapter 386. Okay, get up. Don't you see that people are waiting outside? Shao Qing glanced at Yan Qiue, then got out of bed and changed into simple and convenient clothes. Maybe there would be a chance to make a move today. Yan Qiue also got up lazily. The two of them chatted and laughed leisurely. After brushing their teeth and washing their faces, they went out. Guan Haishan was very patient. He didn't seem to be impatient at all. He took Shao Qing and Yan Qiue to eat in a gentlemanly manner. Breakfast was a kind of fruit, called breadfruit. When the fruit was hanging on the tree, it was green and remained the same color until it was ripe. The fruit was only the size of a fist. When it was cut open, it was full of starch. The hard shell of the fruit was peeled off and steamed in a pot, then it was ready to eat. The taste was not much different from bread. Guan Haishan introduced the specialty to Shao Qing and Yan Qiue with a smile. He also took a breadfruit and broke it open. It was very similar to bread. He sighed, "Although the conditions in this post-apocalyptic world are difficult, there are many things that we couldn't eat before. Even the national level of protected animals have become food in people's mouths." It sounds like base leader Guan has a lot of experience in eating. Shao Qing broke a breadfruit and took a bite, then handed the other half to Yan Qiue. She couldn't be blamed for being careful. It was just that the people around her were enemies. If she was careless, she would be fine. At worst, she could tear space and leave. But what about Yan Qiue? She had to think about Yan Qiue. That's natural. I don't care about anything else, but I like to eat. Guan Haishan smiled and said, "I think the most delicious thing in the world is a baby's heart that has just reached 100 days old. It's cut into pieces, half-cooked, and then served with wine. No delicacy can compare to it." His eyebrows were full of smiles, looking gentle and elegant, but it made people feel cold all over. Shao Qing felt that she was about to lose control of her murderous aura. As long as Guan Haishan dared to say one more word, she would dare to dig out his heart in front of everyone, see if it was black or red, then cut it into pieces and stuff it into his stomach. Guan Haishan seemed to have noticed Shao Qing's surging murderous aura. He sighed and said, "I was just joking. Why do you take it so seriously? If we're talking about delicacies, I have a few mutated white cranes here. I'll ask the chef to make some for you two to try. Then I'll be waiting." Shao Qing said faintly. If Yan Qiue hadn't grabbed her wrist, she really wouldn't have been able to suppress it. Looking at Guan Haishan's faint smile, Shao Qing was completely sure that he wasn't joking. Shao Qing could almost imagine how he cut out the hearts of innocent babies one by one just to satisfy his appetite. Such a person, even if he wasn't a zombie, was more terrible than a zombie. Because he had already lost his mind, his heart, liver, and conscience, he was worse than a zombie. But now she couldn't make a move, because a greater evil was still hidden behind the scenes. She had to find the demonic mercenary group's experimental base and then pull out this malignant tumor. Guan Haishan was just a member of the demonic mercenary group. In the mercenary group, there were countless people who were as crazy as Guan Haishan. Looking at Shao Qing's calm eyes, Guan Haishan was a little surprised, but he didn't say anything. He smiled and accompanied Shao Qing and Yan Qiue to have breakfast, and then enthusiastically took them out for a walk. There weren't many people going out with them, only Guan Haishan and a few ability users with high levels. They should also have a relatively high status in the base. Chapter 387. The so-called going out for a walk was actually taking a walk around the area. After all, there wasn't much to see in this shabby place. The small forest was one of the places he took a walk around. It was the place where Shao Qing had been ambushed. While walking in the forest, Guan Haishan casually asked Shao Qing, "Did you encounter anything special on your way here?" "Base leader Guan, what kind of special things do you think I would encounter?" Shao Qing smiled and asked in a low voice. Guan Haishan laughed and said, "What I mean is, did you encounter any special mutated animals or something new? Tell me about it. I'm very curious." Shao Qing nodded and said, "If that's the case, I actually encountered a group of ants right below your feet. They tried to bite an elephant to death, but the elephant felt itchy, so it stomped its feet and stomped the ants to death. Don't you think it's interesting?" Guan Haishan's eyes were cold. He sneered and said, "It's interesting. An ant wants to shake an elephant. It's overestimating itself. The only outcome of overestimating itself is to be crushed to ashes." Shao Qing also had a smile on her face. "I can laugh at this joke for a year." Yan Qiue stood to the side, watching Shao Qing and Guan Haishan exchange back and forth. In that instant, he seemed to sense a special energy fluctuation from Guan Haishan's body that flashed past. He glanced at Shao Qing. Shao Qing also felt it. There was definitely something wrong with Guan Haishan. The topic was quickly changed. Guan Haishan took Shao Qing to see the pond in the forest. There were living fish in it. From time to time, they could see a fish floating to the surface and blowing bubbles. Guan Haishan said, "Originally, I wanted to move the pond and the fish to the base and raise them in front of my house. I would take some good things to raise them every day. If I want to, I can take one out to eat. Later, I found that these fish are fiercer than me." He raised his chin. Immediately, a paranormal came out from behind him and took out a live rabbit from his bag. He tied it with a string and hung it above the pond. The water surface remained calm for about 2 minutes. Suddenly, several palm-sized fishes jumped out of the water. As soon as they jumped out of the water, the fishes suddenly opened their mouths, revealing a mouthful of sawtooth teeth. Then, they suddenly bit the rabbit. This bite was really fierce. The rabbit's stomach was torn open. It kept struggling and letting out pitiful cries. However, it was quickly eaten by the school of fish that jumped up. In the end, there was no trace of the rabbit's existence except for the blood on the water and the ripples that gradually calmed down. "Is it fierce?" Guan Haishan rubbed his chin and asked Shao Qing with a smile. Shao Qing's face was expressionless. She said indifferently, "Yes. At first, I thought that since it was so similar to me, I couldn't raise it. After all, 2 tigers can't live on the same mountain. Later, I found that they are still useful. For example, they can help me deal with some people I hate and some people I don't like. Guan Haishan's eyes flashed and he smiled very gently. The only thing that makes me angry is that they always don't listen to me. They are very greedy. I feed them, so not only do they eat, but they also learn to prey on passers-by. Naughty. The anger in Xiao Qing's heart rose again. The more she chatted with Guan Haishan, the more she couldn't suppress the anger in her heart. She really wanted to cut Guan Haishan into pieces and chop him into minced meat. How could there be such a crazy person in this world? No, Zhu Mochen said that Guan Haishan was already dead. Then, it was uncertain whether the Guan Haishan in front of her was a human or a ghost. Chapter 388. Guan Haishan seemed to be in a good mood. He said lazily, "I'm telling you this because I want to tell you that it's fortunate that you didn't catch some fish to try when you came. I'm not worried about you, I'm just worried that my babies would be slaughtered." She wanted to shove Guan Haishan into the water and let him feel how much his babies loved him. Xiao Qing, who was about to lose control of her anger, said calmly, "I heard that the scenery around the base is beautiful. I don't think it's a big deal. Are there any other places that are more beautiful? What do you want to see? Why don't you tell me?" Guan Haishan said innocently, "If you don't tell me, how would I know what you want to see?" Xiao Qing wanted to say that she wanted to see him die, but she didn't say it in the end. What she needed to do now was to be patient and wait for Dai to find evidence or something. She looked around and changed the topic. "Why don't we go to the forest behind the base? It's more spacious there. I think there will be a lot of interesting things there. Maybe we can even catch some prey for lunch." Guan Haishan, who had always been sarcastic, was not sarcastic this time. He said seriously, "You're a guest. I should try my best to fulfill your request, but I can't fulfill this request." "Why?" Xiao Qing asked calmly. Guan Haishan said, "The forest was originally a barrier for our base. We could go in to pick mushrooms, wild vegetables, and catch mutated animals to fill our stomachs. I don't know if our actions angered some high-level mutated animals, so one day, there was a beast tied in the forest. They killed all our hunters in the forest. Since then, I've been sending people to guard the forest to prevent others from going in to die." "I see." Xiao Qing nodded. "Then let's go somewhere else to take a look." She said it calmly and casually, as if she really had no interest in the forest. In fact, she had ticked the forest in her heart. Although Guan Haishan acted normal and had a good reason, her intuition told her that there was something unusual in the forest. The more normal Guan Haishan was, the more abnormal he looked compared to his previous behavior. However, Xiao Qing wasn't stupid enough to enter the forest and arouse Guan Haishan's vigilance. The more suspicious she was, the more she wanted to keep a low profile and investigate in secret. After silently memorizing this point, Xiao Qing followed Guan Haishan to walk around. During this time, Guan Haishan repeatedly told her about his hobbies. For example, he liked to tie the legs of his opponents together with iron wires and banish them in the woods. Then, he would release some wild beasts that had been hungry for several days and watch those opponents run for their lives. In the end, because of excessive bleeding and lack of physical strength, they would be torn apart alive by the wild beasts. Those things were wonderful entertainment for him. When Guan Haishan talked about them, his face was filled with excitement and joy. Xiao Qing almost lost control of her anger and murderous intent several times. Fortunately, Yan Qiuyue was by her side. Whenever she was about to lose control, Yan Qiuyue would patiently rub her palm, passing comfort and gentleness through the warmth of her palm. Otherwise, Xiao Qing would have exploded long ago. Even so, when Xiao Qing returned to her room at noon, she was so angry that she almost wanted to tear the house down. Yan Qiuyue comforted her while raising her doubts. "I feel that Guan Haishan seems to be deliberately provoking your anger. Chapter 389. Speaking of this, Shao Qing couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. Why does he want to provoke me? What good would it do him to provoke me? I can't figure it out. Yan Qiue also frowned and analyzed. Could it be that he wants to provoke you and make you ignore other details? So, this base should be hiding a secret. According to what you said, Shao Qing thought for a while and said, could it be that forest? Both of them thought of that forest and Guan Haishan's completely different attitude when talking about the forest. My intuition tells me that this matter isn't that simple. Shao Qing thought carefully for a long time and then said, when Dai comes back, ask him if he found anything. If he didn't find anything else, we have to go into the forest. Even if we know it's a trap, we have to go in. What's that saying again? The most dangerous place is the safest place. It's very likely that they think so too. Shao Qing paced back and forth. After a while, she said, I have a feeling that the thing we are looking for is in that forest. Guan Haishan is not stupid, and he knows that we are not stupid. If this is not a trap, then it's best. If this is a trap, then he will use real bait to lure us in. So, no matter what, we have to check out that forest. Yan Qiue nodded. He understood Shao Qing's mentality very well. This mentality was called invincibility. All conspiracies and tricks were nothing in the face of absolute strength. Therefore, Shao Qing was not afraid of any traps or conspiracies. However, Yan Qiue was afraid. He was not afraid of death. In fact, he didn't care about death. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so careless about his own body. But he was afraid of Shao Qing, even if it was just an injury. He didn't want it to happen to Shao Qing. At night, they went out to have dinner with Guan Haishan. This time, Guan Haishan was much more normal. He didn't deliberately provoke Shao Qing and Yan Qiue. When she returned, Dai was already back. When he told Shao Qing what had happened, Shao Qing almost wanted to rush out and burn down the entire base. It was Yan Qiue and Dai who held onto her thighs and refused to let her go. This time, Dai infiltrated two heavily guarded places. The former was a grain storage, while the latter was also a grain storage. However, the latter's grain storage was only used by Guan Haishan alone. The people locked inside were all young girls and children. According to the caretaker, there were girls being bled every day. The blood that was drained was supplied to Guan Haishan. However, in order not to frequently go out to catch girls and be discovered by others, they would not kill these girls. Every time, they would only release the girls' bodies to the limit and then slowly nourish them. When they were almost nourished, they would then bleed them. And because Guan Haishan liked virgin blood, those people didn't dare to defile these girls. However, those children were pitiful. It was said that Guan Haishan liked to eat children's hearts. Of course, he wouldn't waste the rest of the children's bodies. He asked the chef to cut them into strips and air dry them. According to Guan Haishan, children's flesh was tender and had a unique fragrance. After air drying, it tasted very good. How can there be such a crazy person in this world? Shao Qing let out a long breath. Her hands that were grabbing the bed sheet were covered with blue veins. If it weren't for the fact that she wanted to find the experimental base and save more people from suffering, if it weren't for the fact that she wanted to expose the mad demon's true colors and remove this malignant tumor, she really wanted to rush out and kill Guan Haishan and everyone in this base. Chapter 390. If Guan Haishan was a beast, then the people in the base were also murderers who helped the tyrant. Ah Qing, don't be impulsive. Yan Qiue hugged her tightly. Let's wait until we finish exploring the forest. As long as we find the mad demon's experimental base and have evidence, we can completely destroy the mad demon mercenary group. Otherwise, even if you kill Guan Haishan and the people in this base, Lu Haishan and Chen Haishan will appear in the future. More people will suffer. It's not worth it. I know. Shao Qing took a deep breath and said, as soon as we enter the forest, Guan Haishan will find out that we are not here. So, no matter what, we have to contact Old Master Qin first. Even if something happens to us, at least the news can be sent back. Dai, this task will be handed to you. Dai immediately shook his head and held Shao Qing's hand tightly. He couldn't return to the capital alone when Shao Qing was in the most danger. You haven't shown up, so it's best if you go back. Shao Qing touched Dai's head. Don't be stubborn, okay? Dai didn't speak. He just held Shao Qing tightly. After a while, Yan Qiue said, I'll go back. He was very calm. Even if he didn't want to abandon Shao Qing in such a dangerous situation, someone had to do it. Besides, Dai was more suitable than him to stay. He would get injured, bleed, and lose his combat ability. If something happened, he might become a burden to Shao Qing. However, Dai wouldn't. Although Dai was slightly weaker, he didn't feel pain, didn't know fatigue, and could recover quickly. In terms of combat ability, he was stronger than Yan Qiue. Yan Qiue knew that now was not the time to consider things based on emotions. In any case, the best person to stay was Dai. Shao Qing patted him on the shoulder and joked, our safety depends on you. Yan Qiue stepped forward and hugged Shao Qing tightly. Then, she said in a low voice, if anything happens to you, I will immediately end my life and go over to accompany you. I believe that Dai and the others will also make the same choice. So, take care of yourself. Otherwise, it won't be as simple as 2 lives. Shao Qing's eyes curved into crescents as she smiled and said softly, I know, so we will definitely come back safely. Then, for the first time, Yan Qiue hugged Dai without any reservations and said, I can't stay by Qing's side and face danger with her, so I'll leave the task of protecting Qing to you. I trust you. Yan Qiue knew that in the face of fatal danger, Dai would definitely stand in front of Shao Qing. Although the two of them were love rivals, the more rivals they were, the more they could understand each other. Although Dai couldn't speak, Yan Qiue knew very well what Dai wanted to say. As long as he was alive, he would not let Shao Qing get hurt. If anyone wanted to hurt Shao Qing, they would have to step over his dead body. Why do you make it sound like you're going to be separated forever? Shao Qing wanted to liven up the atmosphere. We're just going to the forest to investigate. Maybe by the time you come over with your men, we'll already be walking back with Guan Haishan's head. Okay. Yan Qiue leaned forward and kissed Shao Qing. I'll leave tonight. Be careful. Shao Qing prepared some food and necessities for him and packed them. Then, she secretly sent Yan Qiue away. The next day, Guan Haishan came to look for Shao Qing again. He knocked on the door. After a while, he heard Shao Qing say, I won't go out today. My baby has chickenpox. Guan Haishan rolled his eyes and then asked, what kind of chickenpox? We have doctors in the base, but we won't let them come over. Chapter 391. He didn't believe it. A high-level paranormal who was fine yesterday suddenly had chickenpox today. Who was she kidding? Shao Qing came over in her pajamas and opened the door. Then she said regretfully, although I would like to walk around again, my baby is very uncomfortable, so forget it. There's no need to see a doctor. She'll be fine after lying down for 2 days. Guan Haishan poked his head slightly and saw a person lying on the bed with her back to him. She was curled up into a ball and looked very uncomfortable. He immediately smiled and said, then I won't disturb you. I'll get someone to bring you lunch. Shao Qing nodded and mercilessly shut Guan Haishan out of the door. As soon as Guan Haishan left, Dai got up from the bed and went out of the window first. Shao Qing casually packed some snacks, then tore open the space and left casually. On the other side, as soon as Guan Haishan left, he ordered his subordinates to carefully observe Xiao Qing's residence. No matter what happened, they were to inform him. However, at this moment, Xiao Qing was already outside the base. She held a dried purple potato in her mouth and waited for a while before she met Dai. Then, the two of them went in the direction of the forest. Normally, this forest was next to the mountain, and there was such a legend. Usually, no one would come here. However, as soon as Xiao Qing and Dai entered the forest, they found a path that had been trampled by people. In other words, people often walked on this path. Otherwise, it wouldn't have appeared out of nowhere. Didn't a famous writer say that there was no path in this world, but when many people walked on it, it would naturally appear? Follow me. Xiao Qing pulled Dai and walked forward along the path. She was sure that when Guan Haishan found that they were gone, it would be at least lunchtime. More than 4 hours was enough for her to search the entire forest. Especially for people like her and Dai, who were extremely fast and were like fish in water in the forest, it was even easier. Xiao Qing took Dai and jumped directly from one tree to another. This way of traveling was much faster than running on the ground. As she jumped, she observed the traces on the ground. If there were people walking around often, it must be Guan Haishan's group. As long as they reached the end of the path, they might find what they were looking for. After about 2 hours, they entered the depths of the forest. The branches and leaves above their heads were so dense that they blocked the sunlight. And that was the end of the path. There were no more traces in front of them. However, the traces showed that there were only a few trees. There was nothing else at all. Could I have guessed wrongly? Xiao Qing frowned and thought carefully about whether she had missed anything. Did she miss something? But no matter how hard she thought, she couldn't think of anything. She walked back and forth and started to think from another perspective. If she wanted to build a base that she didn't want anyone to know about and wanted to hide it, where would she build it? For this base, the safest place around would be this forest. But there was clearly nothing else in this forest, could it be? Xiao Qing had a flash of inspiration. Underground? Once she thought about this, she suddenly realized that she had walked into a wrong place. Since Guan Haishan was a smart person, why did he suddenly behave so strangely when talking about the forest? It was as if he was deliberately leading her to think about the forest. The more Xiao Qing thought about it, the more she felt that something was wrong. Finally, she realized that she had really walked into a trap. A trap that she had fallen into from the moment she walked through the gate of the base. Chapter 392. The most dangerous place is also the safest place. What a good saying. What a good saying. Guan Haishan was indeed a cunning man. Let's go back. Xiao Qing grabbed Dai and prepared to go back. If she guessed correctly, Guan Haishan might even know that she and Dai were going to enter the forest. Just as they turned around and took 2 steps, Xiao Qing suddenly grabbed Dai's collar and rolled backward. A dagger was stuck in the place where she had been standing. I thought you would think about it for a while before you realized the problem. Guan Haishan squatted on a branch and said with a smile. It's not a loss to call you an old fox. Xiao Qing looked at Guan Haishan coldly. Since you have the guts to appear in front of me like this, it means that you have the confidence to kill me. Of course I do. It's just that I didn't expect you to be a 5th level paranormal already. Guan Haishan said regretfully. It must have been very difficult for you to come this far as a 5th level paranormal. It's just a pity that you can only go this far. Anyone can talk big, but if you don't have the ability to do so, I'm afraid you'll break your front teeth in the end. Xiao Qing said coldly. She seemed to be very confident, but in fact, she wasn't at all. Guan Haishan knew that she was a 5th level paranormal, but he still dared to appear in front of her alone. It fully showed that his strength was not lower than a 5th level paranormal. He was even confident that he could kill a 5th level paranormal. Whether I'm talking big or not, you'll know soon enough. Guan Haishan straightened up, and there was a gentle smile on his delicate face. Since we've known each other for so long and have a good chat, I'll give you a chance. Let's fight one-on-one. If you defeat me, you can even kill me. I won't call my companions over. On the contrary, if I defeat you, both of you will die. All right. Shao Qing patted Er Dai's shoulder and gestured for him to stand aside and watch the fight. If Guan Haishan was really strong, then Er Dai wouldn't be able to help. Actually, Shao Qing was a little annoyed. She had been through a lot, but she had failed miserably. She had been too complacent recently and had been too confident in her own strength. That was why she had fallen into a trap today. With her intelligence, she should have been able to tell that there was something wrong with Guan Haishan's words and deduced that it was a trap. She didn't have time to wallow in self-pity. She took a step forward and said indifferently, "Life and death is up to fate. Come. I'll let you make the first move," Guan Haishan said confidently as he leaped and landed in front of Shao Qing. Shao Qing wasn't the kind of person who cared too much about face. Since Guan Haishan was so confident and wanted her to make the first move, she would make the first move. Shao Qing quickly condensed the superpower in her body. A vine whip appeared in her hand, and she whipped it towards Guan Haishan. Guan Haishan reached out and grabbed Shao Qing. "Don't tell me that a 5th-level ability user like you can only do this." Shao Qing frowned slightly. She found that the thorns on the vine couldn't pierce Guan Haishan's skin. With a thought, several vines broke out of the ground and stabbed at Guan Haishan's feet and thighs. Guan Haishan stomped his foot and leaped forward. Then, he grabbed 2 vines and tore them apart as if they were noodles. "That's interesting." Shao Qing observed Guan Haishan carefully. She kept releasing vines to harass Guan Haishan, but Guan Haishan didn't use his power. He only used his speed and physical strength to run around the vines. Chapter 393. Shao Qing suddenly had a guess. She clapped her hands, and dozens of vines drilled out of the ground and surrounded Guan Haishan. Guan Haishan sneered and said, "Petty tricks." As soon as his voice faded, his expression changed. It was too late for him to change his action. Shao Qing appeared in front of him out of thin air, her hand stabbing into his chest. Guan Haishan subconsciously reached out to block, but his hands and feet were entangled by the vines. He was able to get rid of the vines soon, but that short second was enough for Shao Qing to put her hands into his chest. The moment her palm entered Guan Haishan's chest, Shao Qing felt that something was wrong. Under normal circumstances, she would definitely be able to feel the warm texture of his skin wrapping around her palm, as well as the rapid flow of blood. But she didn't. It was as if she had stabbed into a piece of rotten meat. There was no warmth, and even the blood had dried up. Shao Qing furrowed her brows and tore at both sides with her hands. Then, she tore open Guan Haishan's chest. There was a heart that looked fresh, but it wasn't beating. Under the fresh skin, there were muscles that had lost their vitality. Guan Haishan grabbed Shao Qing's wrist and said with a smile, "Surprised? Scared? Or, surprised?" Shao Qing broke away from his hand and quickly stepped back. Guan Haishan didn't stop her. He calmly closed his chest and patted it. Then, granulation grew out of the wound and quickly mended his chest. Soon, there was only an ugly scar on Guan Haishan's chest. It was impossible to tell that he had been injured. Guan Haishan touched the scar on his chest obsessively, then looked at Shao Qing and said, "Do you see it? This is God's masterpiece. Only I have such a perfect body. Only I, and I am the closest to God." He said as if he was talking in a dream, "How could those stupid humans think that zombies are monsters? That is clearly a more successful evolution of human beings. A more successful evolution than superpowered people. Like me, I can't die. I am immortal. I am the spokesperson of God. You transformed yourself. Xiao Qing didn't know how to describe Guan Haishan anymore. She hated her body, hated the fact that she couldn't taste food, hated the fact that she couldn't feel happiness or pain, and was numb like a corpse. She hated her own rotten insides, and hated the fact that she was a burden to Guan Haishan, causing him to become like this. However, he did not expect that there would be someone who would be happy that he had turned into such a ghostly appearance. Guan Haishan was still smiling. I think I should let you know the reason before you die. Yes, I died a long time ago. At that time, I was seriously injured and on the verge of death. After the leader asked for my opinion, he asked a few researchers to modify my body. They implanted a special zombie virus in me, causing my body to lose its ability to function. However, my brain retained a certain amount of activity. At that time, they thought the experiment had failed because I didn't wake up. However, I didn't die completely until 2 months ago. Guan Haishan sneered, the demonic frenzy mercenary group has long noticed you. Do you know why? Those researchers from the south didn't come to join the research institute, but to join us. However, they are all dead. That old man died in your hands, right? Yes. Xiao Qing decisively admitted it. She looked Guan Haishan up and down and said after a long while, do you think you can defeat me because of your strong recovery ability? Guan Haishan opened his arms and said arrogantly, isn't that enough? You can't kill me, so I can only kill you. Chapter 394. Xiao Qing smiled. She put away her vines and walked towards Guan Haishan step by step. A frog at the bottom of a well. She didn't seem to be walking fast. Step by step, she looked like she was taking a leisurely stroll. However, she soon appeared in front of Guan Haishan. Guan Haishan was also very fast. His black and shiny nails moved as he approached Xiao Qing. As soon as he got close, Xiao Qing grabbed his shoulder and punched Guan Haishan in the face. This time, Guan Haishan was stunned. Xiao Qing didn't seem to be moving fast, but before he could react, her fist had already landed on his face. Xiao Qing was very strong. Guan Haishan's neck made a groaning sound with difficulty. Then, with a crack, it broke. Then, Xiao Qing kicked Guan Haishan's chest hard, sending him flying. If it weren't for a tree blocking him, he might have flown dozens of meters. Guan Haishan fell to the ground like a broken rag doll, his head drooping like a broken rag doll. He reached out his hand, and with a crack, he straightened his head. Then, he rubbed his chest and got up again. I told you, these attacks are useless against me. Is that so? Xiao Qing suddenly took a step forward and appeared in front of him again. She didn't give him a chance to fight back at all. She beat him up fiercely. In the end, Guan Haishan was beaten up. He looked like a doll that had been sewn and mended many times and then thrown away. Xiao Qing stepped on his head and said coldly, even if you have a strong recovery ability, so what? You don't even have a chance to fight back. Ah! Guan Haishan reached out and grabbed Xiao Qing's ankle. Suddenly, as though he had no bones, he slipped behind Xiao Qing and hugged Xiao Qing. Then, countless bone spurs drilled out from his chest and stabbed toward Xiao Qing. At this time, it was too late to tear space. However, Xiao Qing didn't panic. She allowed the bone spurs to pierce into her body. Then, she grabbed Guan Haishan's arms and twisted them like fried dough twists. This time, it was Guan Haishan's turn to be shocked. He didn't care that his arms had become fried dough twists. He quickly retreated and said, no. No. His bone spurs were produced after his body mutated. After piercing into a human, they could suck their opponent's blood. But just now, after his bone spurs pierced Xiao Qing's body, they didn't suck a single drop of blood. While Guan Haishan was still in shock, Xiao Qing quickly stepped forward and grabbed his left hand. Her nails pierced into his flesh, and then she directly tore his arm off. Guan Haishan stepped back in a panic, not caring about that arm anymore. He dared to challenge Shao Qing, a 5th-level superpower possessor, because he had an immortal body. He couldn't die anyway. Then, he found that Shao Qing didn't seem to be right either. Shao Qing loosened her muscles and threw away the arm. Then, she said lazily, "Baby, stop him." Apart from Guan Haishan's special body, his strength was just that of a 4th-level superpower possessor. He couldn't withstand a single blow. Air Dai jumped down from the tree and stabbed her sharp nails into Guan Haishan's skull. Guan Haishan rolled on the ground in a sorry state. He was no longer as complacent as he was before. While dodging, he said reluctantly, "No. Impossible. You are a superpower possessor. How could you?" Shao Qing looked at him with pity. "Immortal body, huh? You are really short-sighted. I'd rather not have such an immortal body." "You." Guan Haishan dodged Air Dai's attack and said hurriedly, "Since you are not a living person, then we are the same. We are the same kind. Why don't you stand on my side? Do you want power? Or wealth? Or beauty? I can give you both." Chapter 395. Shao Qing looked at Guan Haishan coldly. After he finished, she sneered, "Who is the same kind as you? Don't dirty my eyes." Guan Haishan said anxiously while rolling on the ground, "For those ants, you drew your sword against your own kind. What's the point? Once they know you're a zombie, they won't care about what you've done for them. Why bother? Say it again. Who is the same kind as you?" Shao Qing said with disgust, "My father and mother are both human beings. At least I know what I am. At least I won't eat living people without conscience." She wanted to let Air Dai practice. Maybe he could take the opportunity to break through, but Guan Haishan was too disgusting. She couldn't help but make a move. She fixed Guan Haishan with her vines, then Air Dai directly stabbed his fingernails into Guan Haishan's skull. In the next second, Shao Qing waved her hand. A black space crack tore Guan Haishan into pieces. Guan Haishan didn't resist until he died. He opened his eyes wide and murmured, "I don't want to die." Shao Qing didn't pity him at all. When he wantonly took the lives of those children, did he ever consider that they didn't want to die either? Air Dai opened Guan Haishan's skull. It found that Guan Haishan's crystal nuclei were all black. It curled its lips and threw them away. Dirty. After making sure that Guan Haishan was completely dead, Shao Qing destroyed his body. Then, she took Air Dai back. Since the experimental base wasn't in the forest, then her idea was probably correct. Shao Qing took out some water and washed Air Dai's fingers carefully. Then, she took Air Dai's hand and walked back. On the way back, Shao Qing ran into the ambush left by Guan Haishan, a group of superpowered people between level 3 and 4. They were all left in the forest forever. She estimated that in a few years, the trees here would grow even more luxuriantly. After all, she had fertilized this tree well today. After dealing with the group of paranormals, Shao Qing and Air Dai returned to the base. They didn't alert anyone and quietly appeared in the base, then went to Guan Haishan's place. Guan Haishan's residence was very big. It was like a small manor. There were many flowers and plants in the courtyard. It looked very interesting. Guan Haishan's temper was unpredictable. There was no one in his courtyard. Shao Qing and Air Dai walked around and entered Guan Haishan's bedroom. Sure enough, there was a pot of fresh blood on his table. He probably relied on this thing to maintain the vitality of his skin. Other than that, there was nothing suspicious. Shao Qing thought for a while and decided to check the other rooms. After walking around Guan Haishan's entire residence, Shao Qing found something wrong. There was a study room where Guan Haishan lived. There were 2 rows of bookshelves in the study room. The bookshelves were filled with books that looked very profound. Xiao Qing randomly picked 2 books. They were all very new. Not to mention reading notes, they didn't even have any traces of being flipped through. Guan Haishan didn't like reading. If he didn't like reading, why would he specially build a study room and put 2 big shelves of books? It couldn't be because he wanted to show off, right? In such a remote base, who would he show off to? So, there must be something wrong with this study room. Xiao Qing touched her chin and began to look around. She and Dai looked around. In the end, Xiao Qing found something behind the bookshelves. She suddenly felt a little embarrassed. She probably watched too many TV dramas. Her mind was full of traps, and she felt that the trap must be behind the bookshelves. Damn retard. Chapter 396. The wall behind the bookshelf looked normal, but if one looked closely, they would find that there were fine lines on the wall. The lines were in the shape of a rectangular door. If an ordinary person came in, they would definitely look for the bookshelf. After all, the bookshelf looked the most problematic, so they would overlook the more obvious wall. In fact, the person who set up this trap was quite smart. Xiao Qing pushed the bookshelf away and began to study the wall carefully. While she was studying, a crack suddenly appeared on the wall, and a door slowly opened. She could hear people chatting inside. Master Guan should be back soon, right? It shouldn't take long to deal with those 2 people. Is the virgin blood for Master Guan ready? Hurry up and supervise him. If Master Guan doesn't have fresh virgin blood to drink when he comes back, he will definitely lose his temper. Then, 2 people came out. As soon as they came out, they were stunned because 2 people who shouldn't be here suddenly appeared in front of them. Xiao Qing and Dai were also stunned. They hadn't found a way to open the door yet, but someone had opened it for them. You. One of them was about to speak, but Dai covered his mouth. Xiao Qing didn't dare to let them make a sound. She quickly stepped forward and subdued the other person. Their abilities weren't high, so it was easy for them to subdue them. Xiao Qing covered the other person's mouth and dragged him to a corner. She asked in a low voice, "Is this the Mad Devil Mercenary Group's experimental base?" The person's eyes were filled with fear, but he kept his mouth shut and didn't say anything. Xiao Qing smiled and looked very gentle. "You don't dare to say it? I'll give you 2 choices. Either you say it now, and I'll give you a quick death. Or you don't say it now, and I'll torture you to death." The person seemed to think of something, but he still kept his mouth shut and shook his head. Xiao Qing did not expect to be able to pry it out so easily. After all, the mad devil must be very tight-lipped. Therefore, she signaled for Dai to bring the other person over. Then, she used a vine instead of a palm to strangle the person's mouth to prevent him from making a sound. "I'm actually quite a gentle person, but that's only limited to humans. When I'm facing animals, I'm not so kind," Xiao Qing said coldly. She used the military knife to open a small wound on the man's neck, the kind that only drops of blood would seep out. Then, he stuffed some daughter seeds into it. Under her control, the daughter snuck into the man's skin and sprouted under his skin and above his muscles. Then, small bumps could be seen on his skin. They were very clear. These small bumps grew bigger and bigger, and soon, they burst open, revealing the tender green buds underneath. It wasn't just pain. There was also a bone-deep itch, as well as an indescribable fear. After all, anyone who saw grass growing on their body would be dominated by this sense of fear. He was in so much pain that he wanted to scream and go crazy, but he couldn't make a sound. He could only bite the vine in his mouth, and then the thorns on the vine pierced his lips and tongue. "He won't die." Xiao Qing looked at the other person and smiled. "All the seeds have taken root under his skin and can't extend to his internal organs, so he won't die. Say, If I throw him into a dark corner and let those cute little buds grow in his body, he won't be able to scream or move. He can only lie in that dark corner and feel those little cuties grow happily under his skin until he starves to death or is sucked dry by those little cuties. Then, when he's discovered, he'll be like a living potted plant. Doesn't that sound interesting? Chapter 397. The remaining person was trembling. If not for Dai holding him up, he would probably have knelt on the ground. Shao Qing patted his face and chuckled. I'll know whether or not it's a laboratory once I go in. Why do I need to ask you? He looked at his companion, and after a while, he rolled his eyes. A foul stench came from his body. Shao Qing looked down and saw that his legs were gradually stained with water, and then there was a yellow liquid dripping down. He was so scared that he peed himself. Shao Qing took a step back in disgust and kicked the person on the ground to a corner. Let him fend for himself. The remaining person kept making a pitiful nasal sound. Shao Qing whispered, "What do you want to say to me?" Dai let go of his mouth and quickly said, "This is indeed the experimental base of the demonic mercenary group. There are many forks in the road, and many of them lead to traps. I'll bring you in." Very good. Shao Qing liked his understanding of the situation. She immediately asked Dai to take him to a corner and take off his pants. She even used the clean fabric of his pants to wipe a certain unspeakable part of his body. In the end, Dai threw away the dirty pants and threw him a pair of underwear. Then, Shao Qing said, "Lead the way." The captive who was holding a pair of underwear was speechless. Shao Qing kicked his butt. "Hurry up and lead the way." He obediently put on his underwear and led the way with his hairy legs bare. Before leading the way, Shao Qing cut his wrist and planted 2 dots in it. Then, she made things very clear. "Lead the way obediently, and I'll give you a quick death. If you play any tricks, I'll make you wish you were dead." The captive originally had some tricks in his mind, but now, he was completely obedient. He led the way through the door. After the 3 of them went in, the door behind them slowly closed. There were lights on both sides of the wall. The light was very soft, and the eyes were not closed. The 3 of them began to walk in unhurriedly. After walking for a long time, they reached the first fork in the road. The leader said honestly, "Of these 2 roads, one is the right one, leading to the laboratory. The other is a dead end, leading to a trap. Follow me." Then, he led Shao Qing and the others to the left side of the road. Along the way, they encountered a total of 6 forks. There were also many places with traps. If they took the wrong path, they would trigger the traps. When Shao Qing walked forward, she calculated the direction and distance. When they reached the last intersection and got on the elevator, Shao Qing suddenly realized that although they were underground, they had already left the base. If her calculations were correct, they should be in that small forest, which was also near the pond. Of course, it was underground. Guan Haishan was really astute. On the first day, he led them to the pond. Shao Qing did not suspect anything else. No wonder it was said that the most dangerous place was the safest place. The ancients really did not lie. When they came out of the elevator, Shao Qing found that the space was very spacious. There were lights on the ceiling, illuminating the entire underground space as if it was daytime. There were many people wearing white coats and masks walking around. Other than the middle passage, there were rows of rooms on both sides. Some of the rooms had their doors open, while others had their doors closed. Once they came down, Shao Qing followed the agreement and gave the captive a quick death. Then, she threw the corpse in a corner and sneaked into the laboratory. The way to sneak in was to kill 2 researchers, change into a white coat, put on a mask, and look around from afar. Chapter 398. The more she looked, the angrier Shao Qing became. Some rooms were filled with test subjects in transparent glass containers filled with strange liquids, and the test subjects were in the liquids. She saw test subjects whose lower bodies had been cut off and replaced with animal tails. She also saw superpowered people who had turned into zombies. There were also babies curled up in their disemboweled stomachs and their mothers. Those test subjects had failed and hadn't been destroyed, or they still had some value, so they were all displayed in the rooms. There were also living people in the rooms. They were all wearing the same uniform like patients, and each of them had a serial number on their chest. Those were the people who were about to become test subjects. Xiao Qing walked into many rooms, and her heart was burning with anger. The most terrible thing was that in one of the rooms, such an experiment was still being carried out. Living people were locked in a sealed room, and then the chemical weapons they had developed were thrown into the room. Xiao Qing saw with her own eyes that several people gradually turned into zombies in the poisonous fog, and finally turned into terrifying monsters that looked like zombies but also a little bit like animals. However, this kind of chemical poisonous fog didn't seem to have been completely developed, because those who had turned into monsters were all dead. She couldn't suppress her anger anymore, and her long nails were already reaching out. At that moment, a man in a white coat hurried over and grabbed Xiao Qing. "Where did you two go? The experiment is at the most critical moment, why are you running around?" Then Xiao Qing was dragged away, and Dai hurriedly followed. The two of them arrived at a room that was twice as big as the other rooms. There were many white coats in the room, and many things were placed on both sides of the room. There were all kinds of drugs and cold tools. In the middle of the room, there was a table that looked like an operation table, and a woman was tied to the table. The woman's belly was bulging, and it seemed that she had been pregnant for 7 or 8 months. At that moment, several people in white coats were surrounding the woman, as if they were doing a cesarean section. One of them said, "The mother's condition is normal, the transformation is not complete, and the life signs are gradually decreasing." Another person was taking notes in a small notebook. "Next, we'll start injecting SX-93, another person in a white coat who looked like the leader said. Immediately, someone came over with a syringe. The syringe was filled with green liquid, and he shot it all into the pregnant woman's neck. After about a minute or two, the unconscious pregnant woman on the stage suddenly screamed. Blue veins appeared on her face, neck, and body. Her eyes were wide open, and her facial features were somewhat distorted. After screaming for a few seconds, he stopped breathing. The leader hurriedly said, "Quick! Take out test subject number 1398. The rest of the people hurriedly cut open the pregnant woman's stomach. However, as soon as they cut open the pregnant woman's stomach, a small white and tender hand reached out from the pregnant woman's stomach. Quite a few people were a little surprised, but they had seen the world, so they let down their guard. The next second, a wet baby came out. The baby came out with its eyes open, and it looked slightly bigger than a normal baby. More importantly, it had a very strange smile on its face. As soon as it came out, it pounced on the face of a man in a white coat like lightning. Then, there was a series of screams, because it gnawed the man's face alive. Soon, several high-level paranormals rushed in and quickly caught the strange baby. However, the man in the white coat had been gnawed beyond recognition, and black liquid kept dripping from his wound. Chapter 399. The leader expressionlessly took out a gun from his arms and ended the life of the man in the white coat. The leader waved his hand and said, "Keep the number 1398 test subject for the time being. This is the only semi-successful test subject we have after the number 068 test subject. Take good care of it. There must be no problems." Xiao Qing's eyes were cold. She quietly took out her mobile phone and took a lot of photos to save them. Then, she left the laboratory and began to look for the power control room. She wanted to destroy this place. This dirty, hell-like place. As for those poor test subjects, she could no longer save them because she found that all the test subjects had been injected with mutated drugs. They were no longer human. Instead of letting them watch in pain as they turned into monsters, it was better to let them disappear with this evil place. However, Xiaoqing was not ready to completely destroy this place, because this was also a piece of evidence. She wanted the whole world to see the disgusting face of the demonic mercenary group. Xiaoqing sneaked into the power control room with Air Dai. She touched Air Dai's head and asked gently, "Are you afraid?" Air Dai shook his head seriously. Xiaoqing smiled and took out a lighter. She calmly found a barrel of oil and poured it all on the surrounding machines. Then, she ignited it. After that, she pulled Air Dai and rushed out quickly. She found a corner, and then vines stretched out layer by layer, tightly wrapping her and Air Dai in the middle. Layer by layer, layer by layer. There was no gap between her and Air Dai. The man's body and the woman's body were perfectly attached to each other. When the vines turned into a big ball, a terrible explosion suddenly sounded. At that moment, Xiaoqing felt that she had lost her hearing. Her head was buzzing and blank. Even with the protection of the layers of vines, her chest was still hurt by the shock wave. After a long time, Xiaoqing felt better. This meant that she could hear. Xiaoqing removed the vines and found that her poor vines had been blown to pieces. At least 1 meter of the 2-meter thick wall of vines was completely broken. Of course, this did not show how terrible the explosion was. What was more terrible was that she saw the sun. The laboratory was originally underground, but this time, the explosion forcibly blasted through the soil layer above, exposing the entire base to the sunlight. Xiaoqing walked in the laboratory expressionlessly. If she met a man in a white coat who was not dead, she would kill him. If she met a poor test subject who had mutated, she would kill him. After she and Air Dai searched, there were no other living people in the laboratory except for them. At this time, the people in the base should have heard the noise and were rushing here. Xiaoqing calmly shot out vines and used them as ropes to pull her and Air Dai out. As they crawled out, Xiaoqing said seriously, "Don't leave anyone alive, understand?" Air Dai nodded seriously. After they crawled out of the pit, many people appeared in front of them. They were all from the base. Their jaws almost hit the ground. Everyone looked at Xiaoqing with disbelief and fear. Then, the massacre came. 2 killing machines that did not feel pain and did not know fatigue rushed into the crowd. They were like 2 lions rushing into a flock of sheep. It was a one-sided massacre. No one could resist at all. At most, they would struggle a few times before they turned into corpses on the ground spurting blood. Xiaoqing took dummy with her and killed all the way into the base. She hated those crazy beasts in the base. She couldn't wait to cut them all up and feed them to the dogs. Oh, the dogs would definitely not eat them. At first, a group of people surrounded Xiaoqing and Air Dai. Later, they were scared out of their wits and were chased by Xiaoqing and Air Dai. She took Air Dai and killed them all the way. Wherever they went, the ground was soaked with blood. Especially after they entered the base, the square where the battle took place. Blood soaked the soles of their shoes. None of the paranormals in the base could escape. Even if there were 1 or 2 paranormals who ran away, Xiaoqing tore space to chase after them and killed them. Xiaoqing really hated this group of people. She even used the cruelest way to kill them. She dismembered them, crushed them or swallowed them by the man-eating flowers. Even so, it still could not alleviate her hatred for them. Especially after seeing the soul-stirring scenes in the laboratory, she couldn't bear to let this group of people die. She really wanted to torture them, make them wish they were dead, and make them unable to get up even if they wanted to. After killing all the paranormals in the base, Xiaoqing and Air Dai searched several times and found a few people who were hiding. Finally, they found the place where those poor people were locked up. There were only a few girls. As for the children, there were only 2 left. They were lying on the chopping board in the kitchen with their stomachs cut open. For this reason, she specially treated the 2 chefs well. She didn't do anything but cut the meat off their bodies piece by piece and stuffed it into their mouths. In order to give them the best treatment, Xiao Qing specially dipped some soy sauce. Look, she was so kind. As soon as Yan Qiuer returned to the capital, she immediately contacted Old Master Qin. Old Master Qin didn't say anything. He directly mobilized the army and took control of the entire Mad Devil mercenary group. At the same time, he led the strongest paranormals of the Qin family and quickly rushed to the nameless base. They didn't rush there like Xiao Qing and the others. It was as if they were traveling. They could travel for 3 days in a day. They rushed there in a hurry. When the group of people rushed there, they saw Xiao Qing, Dai, and a few pale and weak girls sitting in front of a big pit. The strong smell of blood was already a little stinky. Chapter 400. The thick smell of blood came from the pit and the entrance of the base not far away. 2 rows of corpses were neatly stacked at the entrance of the base. Beside them were some broken limbs that couldn't be pieced together to form a complete corpse. The scene looked like hell. The flying flies landed on the corpses, densely packed. Even the ability users who were used to seeing all kinds of cruel scenes since the apocalypse couldn't help but feel a little nauseous. So when they saw Xiao Qing and the others, their gazes were a little strange. Xiao Qing didn't care. She stood up and greeted Old Master Qin, then said, "This is the private laboratory of the demonic mercenary group. Although it was blown up quite badly, most of the evidence is still here." As soon as she said that, those people pricked up their ears. Xiao Qin took the lead and led them to the laboratory that had already been blown open. They looked at the failed test subjects that had not been completely destroyed, as well as the experimental records that Xiao Qing had left behind in advance. Those people who originally looked at her like she was looking at a demon now wished they could rush up and whip those corpses. "You're insane. That's insane." Old Master Qin was so angry that his beard was trembling. He said fiercely, "If the demonic mercenary group doesn't get rid of them, the heavens won't tolerate it. I think the demonic mercenary group must have received the news by now. At the very least, they must have sensed that something is wrong. We must rush back as fast as possible." Xiao Qing said calmly. She was afraid that if they went back late, Wu Buping, that scoundrel, would abscond with his people. At that time, it would be difficult to find him. "I'll take everyone back first. The rest of you can walk slowly." Qin Zishi, who had just returned from a mission, volunteered. His wolves and bears were the fastest means of transportation. Old Master Qin nodded. Then, regardless of his old body, he wanted to be the first to go back. However, after thinking about it, Xiao Qing was the first to agree. Firstly, Old Master Qin was the highest boss of the Qin family. It could be said that he had the highest authority in the Qin family. This matter involved a lot of things. Not only did it involve the demonic frenzy mercenary group, but also the people behind the demonic frenzy mercenary group. With Old Master Qin overseeing the Qin family, it would make people feel more at ease. Secondly, being with them was actually much safer than being with that group of metahumans. Xiao Qing was very worried that the demonic mercenary group would counterattack before their deaths and send people to intercept them. Therefore, the first group to go back was Xiao Qing, Dai, Yan Qiuer, Qin Zishi, and Old Master Qin. Each of the 3 brothers of the wolf family carried an Dai, and Xiong also carried an Dai. She didn't need any mounts at all and ran faster than the wolves. He could even go to the front to pick a flower and then come back to give it to Xiao Qing. It was a kind of Dai romance. The journey was very smooth. They didn't meet anyone intercepting them all the way to the capital. When Xiao Qing and the others returned to the Qin family, they found out that Father Qin was very awesome. Although he didn't trust Xiao Qin very much, he trusted Old Master Qin very much. Therefore, when Old Master Qin brought people to help Xiao Qin, he sent people to monitor the demonic frenzy mercenary group. Just 2 days ago, the demonic frenzy mercenary group suddenly made a move. Father Qin didn't say anything and directly grounded the entire demonic frenzy mercenary group. At that time, Wu Buping found another powerful family in the capital, the Li family, to complain. The Li family was also very powerful, but they were still a little inferior to the Qin family, especially in terms of martial strength. The Li family sent people to question Father Qin why he imprisoned the demonic frenzy mercenary group. Father Qin didn't even meet them and didn't give a reason. He only said 2 words, wait. No matter how angry the Li family was, they didn't dare to vent their anger on Father Qin because in the capital, who didn't know that the Qin family was like firecrackers. They would explode at the slightest touch. Chapter 401. Moreover, they didn't give face to anyone. Their tempers were explosive, especially Old Master Qin. Not many people dared to glare at him. If the Li family dared to say anything, the Qin family would really dare to barge in and beat them up. Even if the Li family was only slightly weaker than the Qin family, they didn't dare to provoke the Qin family. After all, no one wanted to provoke a bomb that might explode at any time, right? Especially Father Qin, who had a background in strength and wasn't afraid. On the other side, the smile on Wu Buping's face all year long had disappeared. His eyes were gloomy as he paced back and forth. After a while, a young man who looked similar to Guan Haishan walked in. This person was Guan Haishan's younger brother, Guan Hailong. He was also one of Wu Buping's right-hand men. As soon as Guan Hailong walked in, Wu Buping asked anxiously, what did the Li family say? Guan Hailong's eyes were also very gloomy. The Li family sent word that the Qin family can't handle this matter. They asked us to wait and not be anxious. Fuck them. Wu Buping was so angry that he kicked the table over. At that time, it was the Li family who asked them to cooperate. The Li family was the one who enjoyed the fruits of their labor. Now that something had happened, the Li family was the first to abandon them. After calming down a little, Wu Buping asked faintly, is Haishan back? Guan Hailong shook his head and said, no, and we're now locked up. We can't send news out, and news from the outside can't be sent in. No one knows what's going on now. Although they couldn't do anything before, they could still contact the Li family. Now, they couldn't even contact the Li family. Wu Buping wasn't worried about Guan Haishan. After all, Guan Haishan had an immortal body. He frowned and said, in the worst-case scenario, our laboratory has been discovered. If that's the case, then we're really finished. As long as our laboratory is exposed, the Li family will definitely be the first to cut ties with us. In order to clear their names, they'll be the first to think of ways to silence us. If the laboratory wasn't discovered. He paused and sneered. The Qin family wouldn't have locked us up. They were already at the end of the road. Guan Hailong whispered, Big brother, what should we do? In a while, pass down the news and prepare to start Plan M. If the Li family is really so ruthless. A trace of madness flashed in Wu Buping's eyes. Then even if I die, I will drag the entire capital down with me. Guan Hailong lowered his head with some trepidation, but his eyes were filled with madness and determination. I understand, big brother. After Guan Hailong left, Wu Buping picked up a potion and looked at it calmly for a long time. Then, he slowly injected it into his body. He had always been a lunatic. On the afternoon of Xiao Qing's return to the capital, the Qin family announced a piece of news regarding the demonic fury mercenary group's 10 major crimes. Ranked at the top was the construction of a living laboratory to research the zombie virus. As soon as this news was announced, the entire capital was in an uproar. Many ordinary people had been bullied by the demonic mercenary group, and there were also many ability users who couldn't stand the demonic mercenary group. However, they never thought that the demonic mercenary group would do such a crazy thing. The evidence was posted one photo after another. Those who had not seen the scene gritted their teeth and wanted to tear the demonic fury mercenary group apart alive. After the anger, there was lingering fear. Fortunately, the demonic fury mercenary group was discovered. Otherwise, what else would they do? Chapter 402. Who knew, they might be the next experimental subjects. Therefore, everyone in the capital supported the Qin family's decision to kill the entire demonic mercenary group. The head of the capital also gave the order to cooperate with the Qin family to carry out the operation. At the same time, the Li family and the major mercenary groups also participated in this operation. Of course, this killing didn't mean killing everyone in the demonic mercenary group. After all, not everyone was bad. There were definitely many low-level people who didn't know what the demonic mercenary group was doing. Therefore, the Qin family's decision was to kill the higher-ups of the demonic mercenary group. They would rather kill the wrong people than let them go. As for the middle and low-level people, they would first capture them and then slowly investigate. However, when they arrived at the demonic mercenary group's encampment, they saw corpses all over the ground. Moreover, they had mutated and zombified corpses with their stomachs cut open. Then, some of the still alive, monsters who didn't know whether to call them humans or zombies rushed out of the house. Wu Buping held a tube of medicine and stood in the group of monsters with a faint smile on his face. Let the entire capital be buried with me. He opened the medicine in his hand. The moment the liquid inside came into contact with the air, it quickly evaporated and turned into a light green gas. Some of the ability users standing at the front suddenly felt that something was wrong. As he muttered, he scratched his itchy skin. Then, he screamed because he saw that he had scratched off a piece of flesh. He was stunned, but the people around him looked at him in horror. He lowered his head and saw that his fingernails were slowly growing, turning into a familiar grayish-black color. The skin on his hands also instantly spread a greenish-black color that symbolized death. It was very similar to the zombies he had killed countless times. He trembled as he touched his face. With a slight scratch, he scratched off a piece of flesh. The edges of the flesh were already rotten. No. Impossible. How could he become such a monster? The man's eyes were filled with despair. His hand trembled more and more. In the end, he pulled out a dagger and stabbed it into his heart. He would rather die than become a man-eating monster. There was more than one person who was infected. Those who were closer were all infected. The rest of the people retreated in horror from the green fog. They couldn't believe it. How could ability users be infected? If even paranormals were infected, then, the fear in everyone's heart was infinitely magnified. Xiao Qin coldly looked at Wu Buping, who was standing in the green fog and laughing arrogantly, and said coldly, "This should be a virus that they have successfully developed. Everyone, step back and don't get infected. Otherwise, even superpowered people will turn into zombies." Some of the infected people stood there in a daze, some knelt on the ground and cried, and some decisively ended their lives in despair. Xiao Qin frowned. She didn't know what to do because the green fog was still spreading. At this rate, it would probably cover the entire capital by tomorrow night. General Qin, in this situation, it's not good to have too many people. Please take everyone to disperse everyone in the capital. Let everyone go out of the city first. We'll move back after we've solved the virus, Xiao Qin said decisively. All right. Father Qin nodded and left with a group of people. Those who stayed were all experts, such as Wu Jiaojiao from Thorns and Roses, Zhu Machen, and Jin Mingyu from Frost. Xiao Qin waved her hand. Gu Chuan stepped forward and tried to condense the water vapor in the air to freeze the green fog. He found that with his strength, he could only freeze a palm-sized area. However, the frozen area was still melting quickly. Chapter 403. Gu Chuan shook his head. His ice power couldn't deal with this strange virus. Wu Buping was slowly walking out. His face was full of malice. Even I can't control this virus. Give up. Even if I die, you'll die with me. Behind him, many babies crawled on the ground. Each of them had a part of their body that was zombified. They were all finished products or semi-finished products from previous experiments. Now, they were all released by him. Go! He said fiercely. Then, the babies jumped on him. Each of them bit his body angrily. He kept waving his hands, trying to get rid of the babies. He also made frightened sounds. Xiao Qing rolled up her sleeves and looked at him expressionlessly. What was the saying? Cleverness overcomes cleverness. Reap what you sow. Wu Buping had a lot of flesh bitten off, but it would slowly grow back. He had injected himself with the virus. Xiao Qing looked carefully. She felt that the babies couldn't kill Wu Buping in a short time. At this time, a little girl walked out of the green fog. She was wearing a loose hospital gown. She had a pair of big, innocent eyes. She appeared beside Wu Buping and slowly reached out her hand. Even if she stood on her tiptoes, she could only reach Wu Buping's chest. The girl frowned. Then, she put her hand into Wu Buping's body. She grabbed his heart and pulled. Wu Buping was so scared that he bent over. Finally, she twisted Wu Buping's neck happily. She tore off Wu Buping's head and held it in her hand. Then, she danced like she was holding a favorite toy. The babies who had eaten Wu Buping's body surrounded her and lay on the ground obediently. The people who saw this scene couldn't help but shudder, even if they hated Wu Buping. Xiao Qing knew very well that this girl was probably one of Wu Buping's experimental subjects. She was probably the only one who had succeeded in the legend. Wu Buping thought that he could control these experimental subjects, but in the end, he was bitten by them. However, what Xiao Qing and the others were most worried about was not the experimentals, but the drifting mist. It was constantly spreading like an infectious disease, dyeing the nearby mist green. The little girl opened her mouth and looked at Xiao Qing and the others with a gaze full of malice. She was like a hungry tiger that had been released from a cage, looking at everything with malice and greed. Xiao Qing took a deep breath and said calmly, although our biggest worry is this fog, the most important thing is to deal with these zombies. If they escape, the consequences will be unimaginable. But Wu Jiaojiao frowned. There's no way for us to enter the fog. Maybe I can give it a try. Xiao Qing's confidence naturally came from her body. She was not a human being. Even if she turned into a zombie, to what extent could she turn into a zombie? She stretched out a vine and then slowly probed into the fog. On the surface, only one vine was probing into the fog, but Xiao Qing was secretly manipulating the vine to absorb the fog into her body along with the vine. To her surprise, the fog not only didn't cause any harm to her, but also turned into a special kind of energy the moment it entered her body. This special kind of energy changed her body while strengthening her superpower. In just a short while, Xiao Qing felt that she was about to break through a small level. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.